Chapter 5699. Kang Shinmu looked at the star map lock floating in mid-air again. He had tried many methods, but he couldn't take it away. Based on the current situation, that's right. Moya sized up the star map lock. Thinking back to what she had just read about the star map lock, the owner of the cave had tried everything he could but couldn't break the power of the star map lock. The owner of the cave abode was a supreme cultivator himself, and his supreme divine power had even reached the 9th level. He even had the tendency to pry into the gate of rules. After he had tried everything, he guessed if he could use rules to break the power of the star map lock. For this, he had traveled around to pry into the rules. Unfortunately, when he had stepped into the gate of rules, he hadn't been able to control his state of mind and got lost. Even though he had left the gate of rules, his cultivation couldn't improve anymore. Senior, do you think the star map lock is related to the power of rules? Kang Shinmu wondered if there was a connection between the two powers. The power of rules is a type of power that can be comprehended and transformed when the supreme strength reaches a certain level. It can be understood as turning the supreme strength of the territory into rules. Moya said gently. But the power of star map lock is a type of power that exists in the natural world. The most common is the power of naturally formed instruments. Hearing Moya's words, the 7 devouring demon sealing art appeared in Kang Shinmu's mind. Whether or not the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a natural instrument, Feng Ling had another identity. Just like the power of star map lock, it was tied to the 7 devouring demon sealing art. When he was trapped in Leng Zhanghong's battlefield domain, Feng Ling's appearance didn't give Kang Shinmu hope. On the contrary, ever since he had escaped, Kang Shinmu had been feeling uneasy. Compared to the divine light from the other world or cruel, Kang Shinmu was more afraid of Feng Ling. Although the power of rules was far away, he could at least figure out what kind of power it was. The power of star map lock was different. Perhaps he had come into contact with it before, but it was ultimately an untouchable power. In other words, there is no way for us to break the power of magic, right? Kang Shinmu looked at the star atlas lock, which was right before his eyes, but he could not obtain it. According to what Moya had said, the owner of the cave manor had 9th level of supreme godly power and was even close to reaching the gate of rules. Yet, he was unable to break the power of the star atlas lock. This was enough to prove the strength of his star atlas lock. As far as I know, magic power does not exist forever. After a certain amount of time, it will disappear on its own. Or it could be fused into a Dharma artifact and become a part of it. In the end, it will become the artifact spirit of the magic tool, Moya said gently. Kang Shinmu lifted his eyes and looked at Moya. Senior, how long do you think it will take before the power of the star atlas lock fuses into the star atlas lock? Kang Shinmu had a bitter expression on his face. Given the strength of the star atlas lock, it was unlikely that it would disappear. At most, it would merge into the star atlas lock. According to the cave master's records, the power of magic on the star atlas lock has existed for hundreds of years, Moya said gently. Kang Shinmu did not know what to say for a moment. It had existed for too long, right? Kang Shinmu, don't be too discouraged. If you can't get it, the people behind you can't get it either. Moya covered her mouth and chuckled. Senior, you're right. Kang Shinmu thought that Moya was comforting him. Kang Shinmu pondered for a moment again, but he still could not break the power of magic on the star atlas lock. He could only give up for now. Suddenly, Kang Shinmu seemed to have thought of something. Senior, when I left the battlefield domain predicament, I appeared in another city. Kang Shinmu suddenly remembered what he had seen and heard. When a few cultivators mentioned the star atlas lock, they also mentioned the star atlas lock core. A few of them were disciples of the everlasting pavilion. I guess the people from the everlasting pavilion were mainly here for the star atlas lock core. Since the disciples of the everlasting pavilion were here for the star atlas lock core, the other 3 sects in the outer realm must also be here for the star atlas lock core. Moya said. Could the Star Atlas Lock core be something similar to magic power? Kang Shinmu speculated. Kang Shinmu's words made Amoya suddenly realize something. When she was reading the scroll left behind by the owner of the cave mansion, some of the records on the scroll made her very puzzled. It said that the process of breaking the power of magic power was because he was restricted by the rules, and that it was the heavenly Tao's punishment. At first glance, the words left behind by the owner of the cave mansion were very confusing. Now it seemed that it should be about the Star Atlas Lock core. The scroll was not completely written, but according to the information Amoya had previously obtained, after the owner of the cave mansion came back from his travels, his mind had been damaged, and he would forever be stuck at the 9th level of the supreme divine power. He would never be able to step into the door of the rules in this life. Under such circumstances, he once again found a clue that seemed to be the Star Atlas Lock core, which made him completely collapse. The owner of the cave mansion had very little records about the Star Atlas Lock. It should be said that he only mentioned it slightly, and then didn't make any other records. After that, he only made a rough map of the mystic realm and didn't do anything else. As for the fate of the owner of the cave mansion, there was no clear statement. Kang Shinmu, this scroll. Amoya handed one of the scrolls to Kang Shinmu. According to what is written here, the Star Atlas Lock core is very likely related to the rules, which means it has the same effect as the power of magic power. Senior, I'm thinking if we should find the Star Atlas Lock first. Maybe we can use the Star Atlas Lock to break the power of magic power on the Star Atlas Lock. Kang Shinmu said what he was thinking. With the existence of the power of magic power, no cultivator who entered the mystic realm would be able to take the Star Atlas Lock away. Yes. Amoya nodded. Kang Shinmu released his soul consciousness, which occupied the entire cave mansion in an instant. It was also at this moment that he realized that there was a teleportation formation in the cave mansion. The formation lines were very common, which meant that it was an ordinary teleportation formation. Kang Shinmu and Amoya looked at the teleportation formation and activated it. The other end of the teleportation formation was the outside world of the cave mansion. In front of them was still yellow sand, and the wind was howling. Everywhere they looked, it was barren. However, what was surprising was that in such an environment, what was left on the yellow sand was not the white bones that they had imagined, but a living cultivator. Kang Shinmu was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect to meet Gufeng here. If it was other disciples of the Wuji Pavilion, it would make sense. However, the person standing in front of him was clearly Gufeng, who had been following him all the way. Not only Kang Shinmu, but even Amoya was a little confused. Gufeng had been following them all the way, and before they entered the cave mansion, Kang Shinmu had activated the hidden weapons in front of the cave mansion. Even if Gufeng had quickly deciphered the hidden weapons, she should have entered the cave mansion first and come through the teleportation formation. How did she appear in front of them? Chapter 5700. You two don't really think you can trap me with that little trick of yours, do you? Gufeng saw the change in Kang Shinmu's expression and couldn't help but sneer. This time, she didn't hesitate at all. She attacked as she spoke. Gufeng's attack was sharp, but not reckless at all. Instead, it was very purposeful. It looked like she was attacking Kang Shinmu, but she was actually targeting Amoya. Amoya had divine power protecting her. The moment Gufeng's Bloodscar attack came, she sensed it and neutralized the power in it. Senior, be careful. Gufeng had just neutralized Bloodscar's attack when Kang Shinmu pulled Amoya to the side. The moment she was pulled away by Kang Shinmu, Amoya sensed the strangeness of Bloodscar's attack. Bloodscar itself was a type of artifact. Because it had been soaked in the power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelant's bloodline, its grade was greatly increased. What Amoya neutralized was just the insignificant power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelant's bloodline. It wasn't the power of Bloodscar itself. Bloodscar was an offensive artifact. Based on Gufeng's precise attack patterns and calculation ability, it could be deduced that Bloodscar was a position-type artifact. It was also known as a formation when it landed. What Moya neutralized just now was the power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelance bloodline. The power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelance bloodline was an extremely offensive power. It often caused people to overlook Bloodscar's own power. Correspondingly, Bloodscar's true strength didn't lie in the power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelance bloodline, but in its position-type technique. Simply put, every time Gufeng swung Bloodscar, a formation would appear. These formations forced the opponent to passively defend. Gufeng was proficient in calculation and could calculate the opponent's next move, causing them to fall into an endless loop. This was the conclusion that Kang Xinmu had drawn from his several exchanges with Gufeng. In the previous few exchanges, he was dominated by the power of the Scarlet Flame Cheelance bloodline and neglected Bloodscar's own power. This time, as a spectator, Kang Xinmu finally saw this point. Moya's beautiful eyes glanced at the space where they were standing just now. The space was distorted. Moya's beautiful eyes narrowed as a white halo flashed across them. At this moment, she clearly saw that there were several extremely fine blood-red threads in the distorted space. At the same time, Moya released her soul consciousness. Her soul consciousness was actually unable to sense those fine blood-colored threads. Moya's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and the white halo in her eyes quickly disappeared. The white halo disappeared, and Moya could no longer see the blood-red threads in the distorted space. Moya glanced at the blood on Gufeng's hand again. She quickly recognized that the bloodstains were position-type artifacts. The more Gufeng looked at Moya, the more she disliked her. He didn't know what she was pretending to be. Every time he saw her, she looked aloof and unapproachable. When Moya glanced at Bloodstain, Gufeng clenched her fist. The bloodstains suddenly disappeared. Jiang Shenwu relied on his powerful soul consciousness to sense the slight changes in the space around him. But he didn't know what the changes were, so he instinctively took Moya to one side. Just as his figure swept out, he suddenly felt a burst of cold intent coming from the front. Only then did he realize that his decision might have been calculated by Gufeng. "Boy, you want to get rid of my calculations? You're still too inexperienced." Gufeng saw that Kang Xinmu's expression was obviously not right and laughed sarcastically. Kang Xinmu noticed Gufeng's calculations and forcibly changed his direction. However, he soon realized that his plan was very likely to be part of Gufeng's calculations. He suddenly didn't know where to go. Kang Xinmu had encountered all kinds of opponents along the way, but Gufeng was the first one who was proficient in calculations, including the position-type artifact in Gufeng's hands. Suddenly, Kang Xinmu sensed a change in the Eight Gods astrolabe. After getting the Eight Gods astrolabe, Kang Xinmu used his powerful soul consciousness to quickly sign a contract with the Eight Gods astrolabe. Although the Eight Gods astrolabe lacked a base, the Eight Gods astrolabe was completely his own artifact. At this time, the Eight Gods astrolabe gave Kang Xinmu a message. Kang Xinmu's vision was suddenly opened. The vision of his soul consciousness was suddenly opened, and he clearly found every calculation of Gufeng's. In this space, there were several very obvious distortions where the bloodstains fell. With the help of the Eight Gods astrolabe, Kang Xinmu's soul consciousness could clearly see the traces of bloodstains near the distorted space. There were even some normal places in the space where there were traces of bloodstains. Kang Xinmu roughly glanced over and didn't see anything. The distribution of these bloodstains was irregular and couldn't form a formation. However, Kang Xinmu found a breakthrough. He brought Moya to a safe place, avoiding the blood-colored aura. Seeing this, Gufeng's face darkened. Kang Xinmu actually avoided her attack. "Is it you?" Gufeng's eyes locked onto Moya. From the beginning of the fight until now, Gufeng knew Kang Xinmu's strength. With Kang Xinmu's strength, he couldn't escape from her calculations. Then, the only one who could do this was this noble woman who didn't reveal her cultivation aura from beginning to end. Moya was targeted once again. This made Kang Xinmu very unhappy. "Why are you so unreasonable?" Kang Xinmu's face also darkened. There was no such thing as pity for a woman. What? Do you want to show off in front of me? Do you think you're worthy? Gu Feng sneered, not taking Kang Xinmu seriously at all. Didn't your family teach you how to respect people? Mo Ya's beautiful eyes narrowed. She took a step forward and stood in front of Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu was slightly surprised. He wanted to stop Mo Ya, but Mo Ya stopped him. Come on, we're competitors now. If I don't kill you and take your treasures, you'll kill me and take my treasures. Why should I respect you? Gu Feng only found Mo Ya's words funny. And Gu Feng's eyes narrowed, surging with strong killing intent. Have you all forgotten what you've done so quickly? Hai Fan is a member of the Wuji Pavilion. You have to pay the price for killing him. Gu Feng shouted. Then, she suddenly moved and closed in on Mo Ya. Kang Xinmu instinctively wanted to go forward. However, Mo Ya took a step forward and faced Gu Feng's attack. Kang Xinmu, stand back. Mo Ya didn't forget to remind Kang Xinmu. No matter where he stands today, he'll die. Gu Feng sneered. You'd better take care of yourself first. Mo Ya's voice was cold, and her aura was fierce. Chapter 5701. Kang Xinmu had just retreated. When he looked up, he saw that the space in front of him was dyed blood red. In a breath's time, the blood red was dissolved by the white halo. After being dissolved, the blood red condensed again and surrounded the white halo. The white halo was not to be outdone. It suddenly spread out and enveloped the blood red. Not long later, the blood red was dissolved again. Not only do you know how to act noble, you also have some skills. He could faintly hear Gu Feng's mocking voice. It was Kang Xinmu's first time seeing such an arrogant and despotic woman. Just hearing her speak, he could not help but feel repulsed. Mo Ya did not say much. She used her actions to suppress Gu Feng. At first, when the two of them fought, Gu Feng gained the upper hand with her absolute strength. But as Mo Ya attacked, the two gradually became evenly matched. As time passed, Gu Feng also fell into a disadvantage. Gu Feng finally stopped hiding and displayed her supreme godly power. Just as Kang Xinmu had guessed, Gu Feng displayed supreme spiritual power. The moment she attacked, Kang Xinmu felt a familiar element. Kang Xinmu had not seen Mo Ya fight many times. To be honest, when he saw Gu Feng release supreme spiritual power, he was very worried for Mo Ya's safety. Gu Feng's methods were ruthless and cold. Compared to Gu Feng's ruthlessness, Mo Ya's attacks were very gentle. Kang Xinmu's heart was hanging in his throat. Mo Ya had always been gentle and intelligent. Facing such an opponent, it was really, Kang Xinmu felt guilty. Mo Ya and Gu Feng's battle gradually grew further apart. Their supreme godly powers were too strong. It actually formed an existence similar to a domain field in this space. Kang Xinmu wanted to go forward but was blocked by the domain field. He could not help but exclaim. He knew that Senior Mo Ya was very strong. But he did not think that Senior Mo Ya's strength was so terrifying. That supreme godly power that seemed to only have a supporting effect dissolved the formation in Gu Feng's blood scar. Even though Gu Feng was good at scheming, against Mo Ya, she was always one step slower. Of course, it wasn't that Gu Feng was slow in her calculations. It was because Mo Ya was too fast. In other words, Senior Mo Ya's calculations were a step faster than Gu Feng's. That was why she was able to accurately avoid Gu Feng's attacks every time. Both of their godly powers far surpassed the 8th level. The domain of supreme divine power separated the battlefield from the outside world. The range of the domain field formed by the supreme divine power was still expanding. In the end, Kang Xinmu had no choice but to continue retreating. With the current situation, Kang Xinmu could no longer see what was happening on the battlefield with his naked eye. Even with his soul consciousness, he could barely penetrate the domain. However, the battlefield was too chaotic. His soul consciousness couldn't accurately capture what was happening inside the domain. Ever since the Supreme Sacred Ice domain seeped out of the extreme 10-directional Devil's Seal, it had been hiding in his mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. Now, the power of the peerless Sacred Ice domain had penetrated the domain with his soul consciousness. Only then did he clearly see the two people fighting. Fortunately, Moya had the upper hand. However, when Kang Shinmu saw the serious Moya, he was slightly surprised. In terms of their godly powers, the current Kang Shinmu couldn't compare. What caused Jiang Shenwu to be dumbfounded was that the domain field formed by the collision of their supreme divine powers had actually disappeared. The ground in front of him had caved in and formed a bottomless pit. The space above the pit was already distorted. The spirit energy in the space, including other auras that could be used by cultivators, had all been sucked dry. Kang Shinmu was worried about Moya's whereabouts. He tried to find traces of her in the distorted space. Finally, he locked onto the right side. Before Kang Shinmu could lift his leg, he heard a familiar scream. He moved to the side, and Tang Xiaoyu landed heavily on the ground. Brother Tang? Kang Shinmu looked at Tang Xiaoyu, whose clothes were tattered. He was very surprised. What happened to Tang Xiaoyu for him to be in such a sorry state? Brother Jiang? Tang Xiaoyu heard the voice and looked up. When he saw Kang Shinmu, his face turned bitter. That senior Moya of yours is really, Tang Xiaoyu panted with lingering fear. Kang Shinmu helped Tang Xiaoyu up and waited for him to continue. Too brutal. When Tang Xiaoyu thought of the scene he had just seen, his face couldn't help but tremble. He was using the 10,000 Elephants Essence folding technique to travel through space. In the process, he bumped into Gufeng and Moya, who were fighting fiercely. When he saw Moya, he was stunned. In the end, he confirmed that the fierce and decisive woman was Moya. Who would have thought that the seemingly weak divine power was actually more brutal than the power in Gufeng's blood scars? Kang Shinmu was stunned. Oh, right. Brother Jiang, why did Senior fight with that crazy woman? Tang Xiaoyu stretched his body. The space had been torn, and he had almost been left in the space crack. Tang Xiaoyu heaved a long sigh of relief. It seemed that his 10,000 Elephants Essence folding technique was not proficient enough. He needed more practice. You already said that she's crazy. Do you still need to ask for the reason? Kang Shinmu shrugged helplessly. Tang Xiaoyu understood. How could a person reason with a crazy woman? Tang Xiaoyu tidied himself up and followed Kang Shinmu. Brother Jiang, are you looking for the star map lock? Suddenly, Tang Xiaoyu asked. When Jiang Shenwu heard this, he stopped in his tracks and his expression froze. Don't be nervous. I found a clue about the star map lock not long ago. Although I'm not sure if it's the real star map lock, it shouldn't be too far off. Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. To tell you the truth, I came to the sealed mystic realm by accident. Originally, I wanted to avoid eldest senior brother's pursuit. Later, I thought that since I'm already here, I might as well look for the thing that old Mr. mentioned. Kang Shinmu trusted Tang Xiaoyu, so he didn't ask any more questions. We're going to look for Senior Moya now, Kang Shinmu said. I just used the 10,000 Elephants Essence folding technique in that direction. Halfway there, I met the two people who were fighting in the space. That senior should be in that direction. Tang Xiaoyu pointed in a direction. The two of them quickly rushed over. On the way, Tang Xiaoyu described Moya's brutality in detail. The two of them quickly arrived at their destination and saw a large area of distortion in the space. There were also bloodstains on the array foundation. Outside their field of vision, Moya had already defeated Gufeng. Moya had no intention of letting Gufeng go from the beginning. After their encounter in the desolate ancient city, Gufeng inexplicably clung to them and clamored to kill Kang Shinmu to obtain the extreme 10-directional Devil's Seal. Moya would never let such a hidden danger follow Kang Shinmu. You crazy woman, you're finished. Gufeng saw that Emoya had the intention to kill and roared. As soon as he said that, he flung the bloodstains. Chapter 5702. The giant creature was covered in scarlet flames. As soon as it appeared, it opened its bloody mouth and charged at Emoya. It was the Scarlet Flame Qilin. The moment the Scarlet Flame Qilin appeared, Gufeng became even more arrogant. Emoya could clearly see that the Scarlet Flame Qilin wasn't its real body. It couldn't even be considered a clone of the Scarlet Flame Qilin. It was just a manifestation of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power. It had the shape of the Scarlet Flame Qilin, but it wasn't as strong. Emoya quickly resolved it. I want to see what else you can do. As soon as Gufeng said that, Emoya felt the space around her start to distort. Emoya could tell that it wasn't the Scarlet Flame Qilin's power, but Gufeng's own power. After fighting for a while, Emoya roughly understood Gufeng's power. She had twin supreme divine powers. Supreme spiritual power was just one of them. There was also a kind of supreme divine power. Although it had not been properly displayed, Emoya had already identified it from some traces. It was the supreme dark power. Emoya had only read about the supreme dark power in ancient books. This was the first time she came into contact with the supreme dark power. The nature of the supreme darkness power was somewhat similar to the supreme shadow power. The core was dark. Different from the limitations of shadow, dark was more comprehensive. In this world, there was light and dark. If there was light, there would be dark. The creation of shadow relied on light. Without light, it was hard to have shadow. But darkness was different. Even if there was no light, there was still darkness. Just like now, when Gufeng's foundation technique was formed, the entire space was shrouded in darkness. The existence of darkness allowed the supreme dark power to unleash a great power. In the current situation, Gufeng still hadn't released the power of the supreme dark power. Moreover, Gufeng's supreme spiritual power was very strong. This degree far surpassed the strength of the 8th level. It felt as though it was approaching the 9th level. When Gufeng used the supreme spiritual power, the supreme domain power that corresponded to the supreme spiritual power worked together. It had to be said that Gufeng's talent wasn't bad to be able to combine the supreme divine power and the supreme domain power so perfectly. Soon, Emoya found some clues about this distorted space. The Scarlet Flame Qilin that she had destroyed appeared once again. No matter what Emoya did, the Scarlet Flame Qilin would appear again. The power displayed by this distorted space wasn't just a formation spell technique, it was more like a type of duplication power. Seeing the power of replication, Emoya instinctively thought of derivation. If it was a copy, it would be fine, but if it was a derivation, then it would have to be dealt with carefully. Emoya was very puzzled about this. After repeatedly checking, she confirmed that the distorted space created by Gufeng only had the ability to copy. Emoya heaved a sigh of relief. Gufeng saw this subtle movement. It seems that you still haven't realized the seriousness of the matter. Gufeng sneered. She crossed her arms and waved them in the air. Emoya's beautiful eyes squinted when she witnessed this scene. A figure from a long time ago suddenly appeared in his mind. Wasn't Gufeng from the Limitless Pavilion in the outer domain? How did she know that person's moves? Gufeng saw Emoya standing there motionlessly. She didn't hide her contempt for Emoya at all, as if she could already see Emoya's embarrassing defeat. Of course, she wouldn't kill Emoya now. She wanted to kill Emoya in front of Kang Shinmu. She wanted him to taste the feeling of losing both his lover and his artifact. This was the consequence of going against the Limitless Pavilion. However, the next moment, Gufeng's face darkened. Her attack had clearly fallen on Emoya. However, Emoya looked extremely calm, as if she hadn't been attacked at all. No, her attack had gone through Emoya. Just as Gufeng was about to dash toward Emoya, she suddenly twisted her body and slapped forward. Her palm didn't miss. Instead, it collided with an ice-cold power. The power was as white as the moon. With a bone-chilling power, it directly penetrated Gu Feng's palm and drilled into her body. Gu Feng instinctively gathered her power. She blocked this power outside her soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. At the same time, Mo Ya's beautiful figure appeared in front of Gu Feng. Her slender jade-like hand was wrapped in a layer of white halo. With a strong power that even Gu Feng was afraid of, she slapped toward Gu Feng's face without hesitation. Gu Feng didn't dodge this attack. It wasn't that her reaction was slow or that she couldn't react fast enough. It was that she was powerless. Mo Ya's fist seemed to have some kind of binding power that limited Gu Feng's reaction speed. "You dare to hit me?" Gu Feng touched her burning cheeks and stared at Mo Ya. "Yes, I'm hitting you." Mo Ya's voice was gentle, but her fist wasn't gentle at all. Soon, Gu Feng's body was sent flying. Mo Ya followed Gu Feng's backward figure and threw a few more punches. What about you? You said it yourself. The weak should be humble." Mo Ya's beautiful eyes narrowed, revealing a dangerous look. Gu Feng wasn't weak. She quickly adjusted her state and put some distance between her and Mo Ya. She was now sure that Hai Fan was killed by Kang Xinmu and Mo Ya. Just as Mo Ya was about to step forward, she felt a cold wind coming from the space in front of her. There was no movement in the space. Moreover, under Gu Feng's distorted state, there was a sudden cold wind. This meant that someone had come, most likely someone from the Limitless Pavilion. As if confirming Mo Ya's guess, the person quickly appeared. It was the big senior brother of the Limitless Pavilion, Dan Yuanfei. Kang Xinmu and Tang Xiaoyu quickly found the domain created by the fight between Mo Ya and Gu Feng. Unfortunately, there was no trace of them in the domain field. The two could only continue to search. "Brother Jiang, Senior Mo is so strong." Tang Xiaoyu sighed. "It's just a domain formed by a supreme divine power, but it can exist for so long. She's too strong. You're not bad yourself." Kang Xinmu said casually. "Brother Jiang, aren't you mocking me?" Tang Xiaoyu was stunned for a moment, then he scratched his head. "I'm telling the truth." Kang Xinmu was indeed telling the truth. He knew that Mo Ya was very strong, but Gu Feng was able to fight with Mo Ya. This was enough to prove that Gu Feng's real strength wasn't weak. What made Jiang Xinwu exclaim in surprise was none other than Tang Xiaoyu. He didn't seem to be very strong, but he could fight with Gu Feng. From a certain point of view, the fact that Tang Xiaoyu could fight with Gu Feng, the crazy woman, was enough to prove that Tang Xiaoyu was a hidden expert. Ha! Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. Kang Xinmu chuckled. "Let's go, this way." Tang Xiaoyu used all his strength to keep up with Kang Xinmu's pace. Chapter 5703. Brother Jiang, apart from the crazy woman, the Everlasting Pavilion also sent their senior brother, Dan Yuanfei. On the way, Tang Xiaoyu briefly told Kang Xinmu about the Everlasting Pavilion. Although the crazy woman is unreasonable and a bit crazy, it is undeniable that she is one of the top 10 in the Everlasting Pavilion. That was the reason why Tang Xiaoyu couldn't get rid of Gu Feng. If it weren't for the Wanxiang essence stacking technique, he would have been caught by the Everlasting Pavilion. "Brother Tang, I have something to tell you." Kang Xinmu thought for a moment before asking. "Are you going to ask me why I had a conflict with the crazy woman?" Tang Xiaoyu immediately guessed what Kang Xinmu wanted to ask. Kang Xinmu nodded. "I got the only Dharma artifact in that space when I went to train. She chased me after she found out about it. I defeated her and she has been chasing me ever since." Tang Xiaoyu had a bitter look on his face. The most fatal thing is that the Dharma artifact ran away on its own. Huh? Kang Xinmu was stunned. The Dharma artifact ran away on its own? What kind of Dharma artifact could run away on its own? Yes, when I first activated it, something ran out from the Dharma artifact, and then the Dharma artifact was gone. Tang Xiaoyu recalled the bizarre scene that had happened. Tang Xiaoyu was a straightforward and easygoing person. He didn't hide anything from Kang Xinmu. That Dharma artifact can summon creatures from the other world. Kang Xinmu more or less understood when it came to the other world. A Dharma artifact that could connect to the other world was not much different from the 8-god star plate. No wonder Gu Feng targeted it. As long as the crazy woman likes something, she won't stop until she gets it. Tang Xiaoyu looked worried. Kang Xinmu had seen how difficult it was to deal with Gu Feng. The two of them were stopped by a series of array formations. The two of them stopped in time to avoid being trapped inside. Then, a shrill voice was heard from within. It was Gu Feng. Hearing Gu Feng's voice, Kang Xinmu was stunned. What about Senior Moya? Kang Xinmu, did you call for help? Gu Feng's figure quickly appeared from the distorted space. The space did not return to its original state. Instead, the direction in which Kang Xinmu and Tang Xiaoyu came from started to distort. Needless to say, the two of them had fallen into Gu Feng's trap. Crazy woman, isn't your everlasting pavilion looking for the star map lock? Why do you keep making things difficult for an innocent cultivator? Tang Xiaoyu took a step forward and inadvertently stood in front of Kang Xinmu. What about Hai Fan? Is Hai Fan not innocent? Gu Feng suddenly shouted coldly. What Hai Fan? Everyone in the 4 sects knows your personality. Do you need a reason to kill someone? Why are you pretending to be a peerless senior sister here? Tang Xiaoyu didn't give Gu Feng any face. Tang Xiaoyu had almost been killed by Gu Feng a few times. Although his supreme divine power cultivation was very strong, it did not have a strong attack power. Just going against the power of the red flame Qilin bloodline in Gu Feng's bloodstain was a bit difficult. Not to mention Gu Feng's twin supreme divine power. Moreover, Gu Feng did not only have 2 kinds of supreme divine power. Every one of her supreme godly powers had a powerful destructive power. In addition, she was an unreasonable person. Because she had her eyes on some magic tools, the number of cultivators who had died in her hands was not small. Kang Xinmu's eyes narrowed as he sized up Tang Xiaoyu. As Tang Xiaoyu spoke, a layer of faint cyan light suddenly appeared around his body. The green halo was very similar to Senior Mo Ya's white halo. If this was the form of Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power, then Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power cultivation was at least above the 8th level. No. It was not just the 8th level. Soon, Kang Xinmu discovered the tyrannical degree of these green halos. Of course, he did not notice it himself. It was the 7 devouring demon sealing art's core inscription that had a reaction. Ever since the battle in the ancient desolate city, not to mention the 7 devouring demon sealing art's core inscription, even the 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art did not have any reaction. Just now, when the green halo appeared around Tang Xiaoyu's body, the 7 devouring demon sealing art's core inscription actually lit up. The 7 devouring demon sealing art was essentially a devouring skill. And the advancement of the 7 devouring demon sealing art required the devouring of the power of the laws. Of course, when it encountered the laws, there would be a reaction. Now that the 7 devouring demon sealing art's core inscription lit up, it could only mean that it had sensed the laws. To a large extent, it could only be that Tang Xiaoyu's power had the elements of the laws. Kang Xinmu was surprised. He thought that Tang Xiaoyu was very strong. If his supreme divine power cultivation was not at the 8th level, it was very likely to be at the 9th level or even stronger. But what he did not expect was that Tang Xiaoyu had already stepped into the door of the laws. Tang Xiaoyu, you really want to meddle in other people's business? Seeing Tang Xiaoyu release his power, the corner of Gu Feng's mouth curled, and she smiled mockingly. If I don't teach a crazy woman like you a lesson, you really think that you're invincible under the heavens, right? Tang Xiaoyu said indignantly. Immediately after, his figure moved, and he swept towards Gu Feng. The speed made Kang Xinmu surprised. Brother Tang, Kang Shinmu still had some doubts. Brother Jiang, you quickly go find Senior Mo. Leave this place to me, Tang Xiaoyu said straightforwardly. Kang Shinmu was worried about Imoya, but he would not abandon Tang Xiaoyu just like this. Tang Xiaoyu's power indeed contained the power of the laws, but why did he feel that there was nothing in Tang Xiaoyu's power? It was deterrence. Usually, supreme cultivators would reach the 7th level of supreme god power, and some would reach the 6th level. Just by releasing supreme god power, they would have a kind of deterrent force. This was aura. Sometimes, when two sides fought, aura was very important. Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power cultivation was very strong, but his aura was a little lacking. Kang Shinmu carefully sensed the attribute of Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power. It seemed to be the power of recovery. Yo, Tang Xiaoyu, you're not running today? Gu Feng mercilessly mocked Tang Xiaoyu. Soon, the two of them started fighting. It was also at this time that Kang Shinmu realized that Gu Feng did not have one type of supreme divine power. Other than the supreme spiritual power, she also had another type of supreme divine power. He glanced at the distorted space around him. In this space, Gu Feng was able to suppress Tang Xiaoyu with just another type of supreme god power. It seemed to be somewhat similar to the supreme shadow power. However, Kang Shinmu was sure that Gu Feng's other type of supreme divine power was not the supreme shadow power. It was more like the power of darkness. After fighting with Gu Feng, Tang Xiaoyu realized that he had underestimated Gu Feng's strength. After a few rounds, Tang Xiaoyu was tired of defending. But Gu Feng was different. On one hand, she played with Tang Xiaoyu, and on the other hand, she trapped Kang Shinmu. The method to trap Kang Shinmu was not a simple formation, but a figure hidden in the shadows. It was a creature from the other world. Chapter 5704. The figure hidden in the shadows looked very much like Cruel. Even the aura of his cultivation base was on par with Cruel's strength. When the 8-god star plate moved, Kang Shinmu took out the 8-god star plate. He didn't hide anything from Gu Feng. Since this woman was determined to cause trouble, she shouldn't blame him for being impolite. 8-god star plate. Before Kang Shinmu took out the 8-god star plate, Gu Feng had already sensed its aura. Go to hell. Gu Feng's figure suddenly disappeared. At the same time, Kang Shinmu felt a slight movement in the space behind him. Although it was just a momentary movement, Kang Shinmu still dodged it as fast as he could. Just as his figure flashed away, Gu Feng's figure appeared at the place where he was just a moment ago. Gu Feng clenched her fists tightly as if she wanted to crush that small space. The space couldn't bear the pressure and cracked inch by inch. Seeing that her attack had failed, Gu Feng's figure flashed and she attacked Jiang Shenwu once more. Kang Shinmu was quite a distance away from Gu Feng. Even so, he could still feel the coldness from Gu Feng's hand gesture. Wherever her palm touched, the space would crack open. No, it wasn't cracking. It was being corroded. Gu Feng's fingernails were different from before. They suddenly grew long, and when they slashed across the space would be corroded. Other than the supreme dark energy, this power was mixed with other powers. Hey, crazy woman. Are you looking down on me? After a while, Tang Xiaoyu realized that he had been trapped by Gu Feng. He immediately used the 10,000 elephant superimposition technique to break through Gu Feng's attack and dashed over. Seeing Gu Feng's fingernails grow long, he hurriedly reminded Kang Shinmu, Brother Jiang, this is the crazy woman's third power. Kang Shinmu's pupils shrank. Gu Feng actually had 3 types of supreme divine powers. It's called the power of replication. It's the inherited power of the Nangong family's bloodline. In a sense, it's also a type of supreme divine power. However, this power can only be cultivated. It can't be comprehended. Tang Xiaoyu was very afraid of the Nangong family's bloodline power. The power of replication could replicate an opponent's power, even supreme divine power. This kind of power was too terrifying. Kang Shinmu was no stranger to the power of bloodline inheritance. In some ancient clans, their ancestors would leave behind bloodlines. The power of inheritance. However, what puzzled Kang Shinmu was that Tang Xiaoyu mentioned the Nangong clan. Gu Feng was Gu Feng. What did she have to do with the Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu, you really talk a lot of nonsense. Gu Feng waved her palm and a bloody aura approached Tang Xiaoyu. Then, he saw Gu Feng's hands forming a familiar seal. It was the seal technique of the myriad manifestations origin superposition art. Damn, you actually copied my manifestation origin stacking technique? Tang Xiaoyu was shocked to see this. He knew that if they really fought, he might not be Gu Feng's match, so he had been avoiding contact with Gu Feng. He was afraid that Gu Feng would copy his manifestation origin stacking technique. This was his unique skill. If Gu Feng copied it, he wouldn't even have a chance to escape. Brother Jiang, stay away from her. Tang Xiaoyu hurriedly gestured for Kang Shinmu to keep a certain distance from Gu Feng. Brother Tang, her bloodline inheritance is acquired, right? When Gu Feng copied Tang Xiaoyu's manifestation origin stacking technique, Kang Shinmu had already released his soul consciousness. The power of duplication that Gu Feng had displayed seemed to be a simple duplication. Moreover, the power of the bloodline inheritance was clearly incompatible with her own power. In other words, if she used the power of replication from her bloodline inheritance, she would not be able to use supreme dark power or supreme spiritual power. The supreme divine power of twin could not coexist with the power of replication. Brother Jiang, you are so smart. The crazy woman's bloodline inheritance is acquired. As Tang Xiaoyu spoke, Gu Feng suddenly approached him. She slapped Tang Xiaoyu's chest. Kang Shinmu did not have time to say anything. He used the power of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain to send Tang Xiaoyu to the other side of the space. Phew. Brother Jiang, thank you for saving me. Tang Xiaoyu had a lingering fear in his heart, so he patted his chest in fear. Gu Feng, who had duplicated Tang Xiaoyu's 10,000 manifestations origin superimposition technique, retracted her duplication power and combined it with her two supreme divine powers to attack Jiang Shenwu and Tang Xiaoyu. Gu Feng's supreme divine power was very strong. With the manifestation origin stacking technique, she could travel through this space at will. Tang Xiaoyu could have used the manifestation origin stacking technique to take him and Kang Shinmu out of this space. However, the figure hiding in the shadows restrained him. Under Gu Feng's strong attacks, the two retreated step by step. Soon, the two of them were trapped. It was unknown what Gu Feng did, but the 8-god star disc flew toward her. Kid, this isn't something you should take. Gu Feng sneered. This scene shocked Kang Shinmu. He had signed a contract with the 8-god star disc. How could Gu Feng summon it? Kang Shinmu had another question. Gu Feng had taken the 8-god star disc, but Kang Shinmu could still contact the 8-god star disc. What is this thing? Gu Feng tried to erase the contract mark that Kang Shinmu had left on the 8-god star disc, but she could not do it. Seeing this scene, Kang Shinmu heaved a sigh of relief. This proved that the 8-god star disc still belonged to him. Even so, their every move was under the control of the creature from the other world. They could not escape. Kang Shinmu had just tried. He could not use the 8-god star disc to directly sign a contract with the creature from the other world. The only one who could resist that creature was Cruel. However, he could only contact Lu Zi and Chong. Chong was born with divine power, but he was not fast enough. Lu Zi had the advantage in speed, but her attack power was not enough. As for the other three creatures, he could not contact them. The remaining dozens of contract marks were the creatures that Leng Zhanghong had signed within the 8-god star disc. He could not order them for the time being. Brother Jiang, let's work together later. Tang Xiaoyu appeared extremely calm at this moment. Compared to Kang Shinmu, Tang Xiaoyu could still move freely under the restraint of the creature from the other world. Kang Shinmu's eyes narrowed. Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power was the supreme recovery power. It was a very powerful auxiliary supreme divine power. Tang Xiaoyu wanted to use his supreme recovery power to strengthen Kang Shinmu's supreme divine power, so that he could break through the restraint of the creature from the other world. All of this was seen by Gu Feng. Gu Feng interrupted the cooperation between the two and sent Tang Xiaoyu into a distorted space using the manifestation origin stacking technique that she had replicated in the past. Hey, crazy woman, is the Wuji Pavilion going to war with the Heavenly Origin Palace? Tang Xiaoyu reacted quickly. He adjusted the 10,000 nature stacking technique so that he would not get lost in the distorted space. So what if we go to war? Gu Feng sneered. As a disciple of the Heavenly Origin Palace, you are protecting the culprit who killed Hai Fan. Aren't you the one who wants to go to war with the Wuji Pavilion? If the people of the Wuji Pavilion were not unreasonable, how would we end up like this? Tang Xiaoyu retorted. Is that all you can do? Gu Feng knew Tang Xiaoyu too well. His cultivation was not good, but he was good at talking. Yes, that's all I can do. Tang Xiaoyu's expression froze. He chanted and the distorted space disappeared. When it appeared again, it was already beside Gu Feng, trapping Gu Feng within it. Tang Xiaoyu took advantage of the time when Gu Feng could not react and pushed her back. After taking a few hits from Tang Xiaoyu, Gu Feng's face turned ugly. Tang Xiaoyu. You're courting death. Gu Feng roared and flung out a trail of blood. Chapter 5705. Ever since Gu Feng had set her eyes on Tang Xiaoyu, she had never shown any mercy. Hence, Tang Xiaoyu did not plan to show any mercy to Gu Feng. He planned to take this opportunity to get rid of Gu Feng. After sending Gu Feng into the shattered void, Tang Xiaoyu followed closely behind. Brother Tang, be careful. Tang Xiaoyu's action surprised Kang Shinmu. She had been with Tang Xiaoyu for some time now, so she knew how unreasonable Gu Feng could be. To put it bluntly, Gu Feng was courting death. However, Gu Feng was very strong. This was the attitude of an expert. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. As soon as Tang Xiaoyu finished speaking, his entire body disappeared into the shattered void. Kang Shinmu hesitated for a moment, but still followed Tang Xiaoyu. He was not an ungrateful person. He would not leave Tang Xiaoyu alone at a time like this. However, just as half of Kang Shinmu's body disappeared into the shattered void, he was suddenly pulled out by a hand that appeared out of nowhere. This hand appeared so abruptly that Kang Shinmu did not sense the other party's aura at all. Kang Shinmu took a few steps back in order to dispel the pressure brought by the other party. Although this force had no intention of attacking him, this level of intensity made Kang Shinmu feel fearful. Brother, don't be rash. The one who stopped Kang Shinmu was an elegant young man in a long white robe. He glanced at Kang Shinmu, then his eyes fell on the shattered void. His hand gestures changed rapidly, and he grasped the air across space. At this moment, Kang Shinmu clearly saw the distorted space gradually returning to normal. Tang Xiaoyu, who had already disappeared into the void, also appeared. Eldest senior brother. The moment Tang Xiaoyu felt the change in space, he knew that eldest senior brother Lian Yi had arrived. Seeing Lian Yi, Tang Xiaoyu did not say a word and ran away. Tang Xiaoyu, go back with me. Lian Yi pointed casually, and Tang Xiaoyu, who had gone far away, returned in front of Lian Yi. Kang Shinmu was shocked. Lian Yi's attainments in the manifestation origin superposition technique had already reached the point where he could change the trajectory of space at will. Big senior brother, I want to go back with you too, but I have no choice. That crazy woman from the Limitless Pavilion is really too much. She chased me all the way here and slashed at me. Just who did I offend? Tang Xiaoyu cried. Are you talking about Limitless Pavilion's Lady Gu Feng? Lian Yi asked. Regarding Lady Gu Feng's matter, Palace Master will make a decision after you return to Heaven Origin Palace. Eldest senior brother, I suspect that there's something wrong with your brain. Tang Xiaoyu exploded when he heard this. That was all Lien Yi could say. But the reality was that Lien Yi was trying to reason with Gu Feng, but Gu Feng never intended to reason with Lien Yi. Moreover, Gu Feng even wanted to fight Lien Yi together. As they spoke, Gu Feng also rushed out. Before he could show himself, blood scar had already flown over. This time, 3 blood scars flew over. The 3 streaks of blood were aimed at the 3 people standing there. Eldest senior brother, did you see that? Tang Xiaoyu felt a headache when he saw the blood scar. He knew that Gu Feng's blood scar had been soaked in the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power, so it was very powerful. However, logically speaking, the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power would be exhausted sooner or later. The Scarlet Flame Qilin's blood scar seemed to be inexhaustible, and it continued to exist. The Scarlet Flame Qilin was a race with extremely strong combat power. Just the power of its bloodline was enough to cripple him. This crazy woman clearly wants to kill me, and you still want to reason with her? Tang Xiaoyu was incomparably furious. Jiang Shenwu was slightly startled as he sensed the strength of the bloodstains coming at him. When they exchanged blows earlier, he clearly consumed the Scarlet Flame Qilин's bloodline power and the blood scar. How did the Scarlet Flame Qilин's bloodline power recover so quickly? Moreover, he faintly felt that the Scarlet Flame Qilин's bloodline power was much stronger than before. Brother, our private matters have implicated you. I'm very sorry. Lien Yi saw that one of the blood scars was approaching Kang Xinmu and hurriedly stopped it. Kang Xinmu clasped his fists at Lien Yi. Lien Yi casually waved his hand, and the blood scar disappeared. Among the 3 blood scars, 2 of them were replicated by Gu Feng. Only one of the wounds was real. And the real target was Tang Xiaoyu. I want to kill you. What can you do to me? Gu Feng followed closely behind, looking at Tang Xiaoyu with disdain. Lien Yi couldn't let Gu Feng bully Tang Xiaoyu, so he stopped the blood scar's attack. Miss Nangong, is there any misunderstanding between you and Tang Xiaoyu? I hope we can talk about it, Lien Yi said slowly. He stood in front of Tang Xiaoyu. Just by standing there, Gu Feng's attack was stopped. Oh, it's Lien Yi. Gu Feng saw Lien Yi, but she didn't plan to stop. Instead, she gripped the blood scar tightly. Above the blood scar, 2 beams of light emerged, one black and one white. This meant that she had 2 types of peerless divine powers. The Supreme Dark Power and the Supreme Spirit Power. The 2 forces intertwined with each other and gradually fused. When they overlapped, they seemed to form a new force. Eldest senior brother, why did you call her Miss Nangong? Do you think she's good enough for a member of the Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu's words were fierce, but he still hid behind Lien Yi. Gu Feng originally wanted to have a friendly conversation with Lien Yi, but now, after hearing Tang Xiaoyu's words, her anger was ignited. Miss Nangong, please don't mind Tang Xiaoyu's words. I will make him apologize to you. Lien Yi tried to talk to Gu Feng. Gu Feng wasn't in the mood to listen to Lien Yi. Lien Yi, if you keep blocking me, don't blame me for being impolite. Facing Lien Yi, Gu Feng's face was cold. Gu Feng still had respect for Lien Yi. After all, Lien Yi called her Miss Nangong, which was an acknowledgement of her identity. Provided that Lien Yi didn't stop her from killing Tang Xiaoyu. Seeing that he couldn't reconcile with Gu Feng, Lien Yi planned to make Tang Xiaoyu apologize in person. However, the moment he turned around, he found that Tang Xiaoyu had disappeared. At the same time, Kang Xinmu was also nowhere to be seen. Lien Yi, those who know you know that you're humble and gentle, and you always follow the rules. Those who don't know you will only think that you're purposely going easy on Tang Xiaoyu. You're on your own, Gu Feng said indifferently and dashed to the side. Lien Yi stood there, thinking about Gu Feng's words. After a while, he shook his head. Tang Xiaoyu used the 10,000 origin superposition technique to take him and Kang Xinmu away from Gu Feng's space. Brother Jiang, I'll take you to find the star map lock, but you must be fast. Don't get caught. Tang Xiaoyu didn't have any other mission in this secret realm. He just wanted to verify the old man's words. Now that he had already verified it, he had nothing else to do. After entering the secret realm, Tang Xiaoyu saw Gu Feng and the others. He knew that the 4 major sects had sent people to look for the star map lock. Tang Xiaoyu didn't have any thoughts about the star map lock, but he couldn't stand Gu Feng anymore. As long as the everlasting pavilion couldn't get the star map lock, it didn't matter who had it. Following Tang Xiaoyu's instructions, the two arrived at an abandoned palace. Chapter 5706. Kang Xinmu was slightly astonished. Could the seal floating in front of him be the star map lock? This was an abandoned palace. It barely had a door, and the surrounding walls were in tatters. It didn't even have a decent roof. If the star map lock was really here, why wouldn't anyone care? Brother Jiang, I was the first to discover this place, but you were the first to enter. Whether or not we can obtain the star map lock depends on you. Tang Xiaoyu shouted from outside the door. However, the people from the 4 great sects should have a map of this place. It won't be long before they find us. You should hurry. Tang Xiaoyu was right, but Kang Xinmu still had some misgivings in his heart. Compared to the star map lock's low profile, the star map lock's appearance was a little high profile. However, now wasn't the time to think about these things. If he had any questions, he would first obtain the star map lock. Kang Xinmu released his soul consciousness to inspect this palace. He couldn't help but be shocked. Previously, he only noticed that this was an ordinary and dilapidated palace. But now that he used his soul consciousness to inspect it, he discovered the mysteries of this palace. This palace itself was a formation. Right now, Kang Xinmu's soul consciousness contained the power of the peerless sacred ice domain. He could see some obscure things that his soul consciousness couldn't. When his soul consciousness that contained the power of the peerless sacred ice domain covered the entire palace, Kang Xinmu could clearly sense the existence of the formation. His eyes had merged with the power of the 7 devouring demons' sealing art. At this moment, under the effect of his soul consciousness, he could also see the patterns of the formation. The formation was drawn in a very normal way, but the patterns of the formation were not sealed. Kang Xinmu had seen this kind of formation before in the ancient desolate city. Leng Zhanghong's battle formation was similar to this formation. Without a doubt, this was a derivation formation. Kang Xinmu released the power of his soul following the patterns of the formation and discovered something that shocked him. The derivation formation extended far into the distance. It exceeded the range that Kang Xinmu's soul consciousness could currently cover. With such a powerful formation, Kang Xinmu suddenly felt that it didn't matter where the star atlas lock floated. As if it had sensed Kang Xinmu's presence, the entire derivation formation suddenly emerged. At this moment, Kang Xinmu seemed to have entered a mysterious space. At the same time, outside the palace, Tang Xiaoyu suddenly felt something strange in the space, so he moved closer to the door. Brother Jiang? There was no one in the palace? Tang Xiaoyu strode into the palace and had a panoramic view of everything inside. Apart from the star map lock that was floating in the air, there was no sign of Kang Xinmu. Tang Xiaoyu probed with his soul consciousness and found traces of Kang Xinmu. However, to Tang Xiaoyu's astonishment, he could sense Kang Xinmu's aura, but he couldn't find Kang Xinmu's figure. It gave him the feeling that Kang Xinmu was in a different space from him. When Tang Xiaoyu sensed Kang Xinmu's aura, Kang Xinmu also sensed Tang Xiaoyu's aura. Compared to Tang Xiaoyu who could only sense his aura, Kang Xinmu could see Tang Xiaoyu. Kang Xinmu quickly realized that he and Tang Xiaoyu were in a different space. After giving Tang Xiaoyu some instructions, Kang Xinmu focused on the star map lock. Tang Xiaoyu thought that he had nothing to do anyway, so he continued to use the 10,000 manifestations origin superposition technique to search for traces of Senior Amoya. However, he was stopped by Gu Feng again as soon as he left the palace. Inside the palace, Kang Shinmu was in the space within the formation. The entire derivation formation covered a very wide area. With Kang Shinmu's ability, he couldn't detect the entire area covered by the formation. He memorized all the runes of the formation that he could see. After calculating the formation patterns that he had memorized so far, Kang Shinmu only understood the tip of the iceberg. The part of the formation that he understood had the word protection in it. He could basically confirm that this derivation formation was a protection formation. The purpose of its existence was to protect the star map lock. As for who had set up the derivation formation, it was unknown. Kang Shinmu had a rough understanding of the derivation formation. It was only a protection formation and wouldn't attack intruders. The star map lock was right in front of him. Kang Shinmu gathered his power and approached the star map lock. He didn't know much about the star map lock. The reason why he was looking for the star map lock was to crack the magic power on it. As soon as Kang Shinmu came into contact with the star map lock, he felt a repulsive force from it. At that moment, a devouring force emerged and covered the entire star map lock. It then spread rapidly in all directions. The devouring force devoured the repulsive force on the star map lock. Kang Shinmu also established a connection with the star map lock. The star map lock was usually called the Dharma seal. It was a general term for the power that came after one stepped into the rule gate and obtained the power of the rule. It was called the Dharma seal. The Dharma seal of the star map lock didn't belong to a rule master. Instead, it was a power formed together with the magic power after the star map lock was formed. However, when the star map lock appeared, it experienced a parallel world war, causing the Dharma seal and the star map lock to be separated. There were also theories about the star map lock in the future, but in the end, it couldn't be separated from the star map lock. It was only regarded as a part of the star map lock. The star map lock, which was also known as the Dharma seal, was a part of the star map lock. However, there was still a qualitative difference between it and the star map lock spatial magic tool. Any cultivator who had mastered the power of the rule could use this Dharma seal to achieve the purpose of spatial transmission. Of course, this was too far away for the current Kang Shinmu. The Dharma seal looked like a piece of jade. However, after Kang Shinmu took it, the Dharma seal turned into a stream of light and entered his body. Kang Shinmu instinctively wanted to resist this external force, but he realized that the Dharma seal was heading straight for his soul consciousness. His soul consciousness did not stop the Dharma seal. It allowed the Dharma seal to fuse with his soul consciousness. At this moment, the supreme sacred ice domain that had been condensed together gradually dispersed. After the Dharma seal fused with his soul consciousness, Kang Shinmu didn't feel any abnormalities. Instead, he felt that his senses had become more acute. The devouring power that was released continued to spread along with the derivation array. The moment the Dharma seal fused with his soul consciousness, Kang Shinmu could sense what the devouring power was devouring. It was a type of power that permeated the derivation array. This type of power was different from the aura of ordinary cultivators. It was mostly used to set up arrays. From the moment the devouring power appeared, it had been devouring this power. However, Kang Shinmu couldn't sense the power being devoured by the devouring power. After the Dharma seal fused with his soul consciousness, Kang Shinmu sensed the existence of this power. Chapter 5707. Even though he had obtained the power of the seal, Kang Shinmu still did not understand the derivation array formation that protected this palace. Moreover, even though he had obtained the seal, he was still in the derivation array formation. The seal fused with his soul consciousness, and his soul consciousness was greatly strengthened. The range of the devouring power kept increasing. Even though the range of the array formation that his soul consciousness could detect was expanding, the devouring power also expanded. In fact, the devouring power's speed surpassed the speed that his soul consciousness could detect. Kang Shinmu had a rough understanding of the strength of the devouring power. It could devour some of the elements that existed in the derivation array formation. However, the range of the devouring power exceeded the range that his soul consciousness could detect. This was something that Kang Shinmu did not expect. This was enough to prove how powerful the 7 devouring demon sealing art was. These were only 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, and they were only at the first realm. If the complete 7 devouring demon sealing art reached the 7th realm, how powerful would the 7 devouring demon sealing art be? At that time, what kind of devouring power would it have? With the seal, the range of Kang Shinmu's soul consciousness gradually expanded. Compared to the speed at which the devouring power spread, it was still much slower. Based on the current situation, the devouring power would sooner or later surpass the range of his soul consciousness. Since the devouring power had not been withdrawn, Kang Shinmu would not be able to leave the space formed by the derivation array formation for a while. Kang Shinmu closed his eyes to rest and gathered his power. The power of the Supreme Sacred Ice domain gradually merged with the seal and floated in the sea of consciousness of his soul. Just like the seal of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, it maintained a balance with his soul consciousness. This process seemed short, but in fact, several hours had passed. When Kang Shinmu withdrew his mind, the devouring power had already stopped devouring. After the devouring power devoured the elements in the derivation array formation, Kang Shinmu had a rough understanding of this array formation. This protective array formation was not the array formation that protected the seal, but the array formation that protected the palace. This palace was a gate to another world. The derivation formation existed here to protect the gate and prevent the other world from being invaded. Moreover, this palace was not originally in the world that Kang Shinmu lived in. They came from another world. The palace was connected to the other world. An unprecedented civil war had occurred in the other world, causing the world to collapse. The palace fell into the spatial crack, and because of that, it kept moving. Coincidentally, it fell into the sealed secret realm that was also moving. That was where he was now. The star map core lock, which was also the seal, appeared in this array formation purely by chance. Kang Shinmu roughly estimated that the devouring power could absorb the power of the elements in the formation and could construct a makeshift derivative formation. He did not know much about derivation formations, so he did not know how to deal with these formation elements. He only knew that these elements were the energy in the formation and were mostly used to construct the formation. They were somewhat similar to the foundation of the formation. After devouring the power, Kang Shinmu had a certain understanding of constructing the formation. Using these elements, Kang Shinmu soon found the foundation of the formation and successfully left the array formation. The moment he stepped out of the derivation array formation, Kang Shinmu saw the palace. The interior of the palace was different from what he had seen when he stepped into the array formation. Although the interior of the palace was spacious and there were not many decorations, the palace was intact, especially the roof above the palace. It was completely different from the dilapidated palace he had seen earlier. Was this the palace that was connected to another world by the derivation array formation? When Kang Shinmu completely stepped out of the array formation, the palace that he was in returned to its original appearance. The palace was still the dilapidated palace. The only difference was that there was one more person in the palace. Kang Shinmu, hand over the star map core. Gu Feng shouted coldly as he stared at Kang Shinmu with his malicious eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire palace shook. At the same time, Gu Feng flung out a streak of blood. Wherever the streak of blood passed, the already dilapidated palace became even more dilapidated. Kang Shinmu moved and quickly dashed out of the palace. Outside the palace, Kang Shinmu did not see Tang Xiaoyu. There was no remnant of Tang Xiaoyu's energy in the air. Gu Feng chased after him and attacked ruthlessly. From the looks of it, even if Kang Shinmu handed over the star map core, he would not let Kang Shinmu go. Just as Kang Shinmu opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Gu Feng. It's too late for you to say anything now. I won't let you go. Gu Feng shouted coldly, as long as I kill you, let alone the star map core, the ultimate devil seal, and everything else will be mine. Kang Shinmu's eyes narrowed. Gu Feng had chased after him relentlessly for the treasures on him. The Dharma seal had long been integrated into Kang Shinmu's soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. Naturally, Kang Shinmu could not hand it over. Of course, he would not hand it over either. In terms of supreme divine power cultivation, Kang Shinmu admitted that he was not Gu Feng's match. However, one's cultivation realm did not mean anything. Whether he was a match or not could not be judged on the surface. Kang Shinmu did not retreat and faced Gu Feng's attack head-on. This time, Gu Feng was determined to take down Kang Shinmu. Once he attacked, he did not give Kang Shinmu any chance at all. The moment he released his twin supreme divine power, he also summoned the figure in the shadows. Kang Shinmu could clearly see that the figure in the shadows appeared with Gu Feng's supreme dark power. In other words, when Gu Feng released the supreme dark power, that person appeared. Gu Feng did not use a summoning contract Dharma treasure to summon the other party. Kang Shinmu even suspected that the mysterious person in the shadows, who looked like Cruel, was from this world. The moment that person appeared, he went straight for Kang Shinmu. With Kang Shinmu's current reaction speed, he could only barely catch that person's tracks. Moreover, this person only used a movement technique and not a spatial secret technique. In this world, the only movement technique that used space as a medium was the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition technique. Kang Shinmu could tell that this person used the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition technique. When this person used his movement technique, the space around him did not fluctuate. This meant that he did not use the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition technique. In that case, what kind of movement technique was he using? Kang Shinmu could avoid Gu Feng's attack, but it was difficult for him to avoid this person's attack. Seeing that he could not avoid this person's attack, Kang Shinmu did not retreat. Instead, he faced this person's attack head-on. The other party was very fast. Kang Shinmu's attacks missed many times. Unlike last time, this time, Kang Shinmu had a madra. The madra could be understood as a kind of spatial law. The moment Kang Shinmu activated the madra, he quickly grasped the mysterious person's movement technique. With the help of the madra, Kang Shinmu did not fall into a disadvantage. Even so, both sides were in a stalemate. Once Gu Feng attacked, this stalemate was broken. Kang Shinmu was once again at a disadvantage. Are you waiting for your savior? Chapter 5708. Gu Feng could fight with Senior Amoya, so he couldn't be weak. Of course, it was too arrogant to kill Tang Xiaoyu with just this power. Kang Shinmu wasn't affected by Gu Feng's words and gradually became familiar with the function of the seal. With the help of the seal, the mysterious man's movements were all under his control. The only drawback was that Kang Shinmu could only grasp the mysterious man's movements and couldn't defeat him for a while. The 8-god star plate is in the way. Suddenly, the mysterious man spoke. It was a dull, emotionless voice. Of course, he was talking to Gu Feng. Gu Feng sneered. Leave the 8-god star plate to me. The 8-god star plate belonged to Hai Fan, which was a disciple of the everlasting pavilion. Now that Hai Fan was dead, the 8-god star plate should belong to the everlasting pavilion instead of falling into the hands of Kang Shinmu. Moreover, the reason why Hai Fan died was because of Kang Shinmu. Gu Feng waved the blood stain. The power of the red flame Qilin's bloodline attacked again. The power of the red flame Qilin's bloodline was as strong as before, as if it had never been consumed. The moment the power of the red flame Qilin's bloodline was released, Kang Shinmu clearly felt that the 8-god star plate had changed again. Kang Shinmu no longer had any scruples and took out the 8-god star plate in front of Gu Feng. After looking at it for a while, he found that there was a mark on the 8-god star plate that was flashing. When the light flashed, Kang Shinmu concentrated his soul and consciousness and felt the aura of the red flame Qilin's bloodline. Seeing this scene, Kang Shinmu felt a lingering fear. It turned out that the 8-god star plate had always been marked by the power of the red flame Qilan's bloodline. No wonder Gu Feng always caught up. Kang Shinmu released his devouring power and covered the mark. When the devouring power covered the mark, it still couldn't devour the power of the mark. Give up. This is a contract imprint left behind by the bloodline of the scarlet flame Qilan. Do you really think you can erase it? Gu Feng sneered as she watched Kang Shinmu's every move. Kang Shinmu ignored Gu Feng. He continued to control the seal and released the devouring power again. This time, the devouring power began to devour the mark. It was undeniable that the scarlet flame Qilan's bloodline power was indeed very strong. Even Kang Shinmu did not notice that he had left this mark on the 8-god star plate. However, this mark was clearly not a contract mark. The first person to leave a contract imprint on the 8-god star plate was Hai Fan. After Hai Fan died, Kang Shinmu easily left a contract imprint on it. If the contract mark left behind by the Scarlet Flame Qilan bloodline still existed on the 8-god star plate, then Kang Shinmu would not be able to leave behind the contract mark. In fact, not only did Kang Shinmu leave a contract mark on the 8-god star plate, but he also became the new owner of the 8-god star plate. This meant that the Scarlet Flame Qilan bloodline power was the contract mark left behind after this. Although the devouring process was slow, it could still be devoured. Moreover, Kang Shinmu still had the right to use the 8-god star plate. At this moment, the connection between Gu Feng and the 8-god star plate was completely severed. The Scarlet Flame Qilan bloodline power was what she relied on to regain the 8-god star plate. Now that it was gone, Gu Feng was furious. Even at this time, the conceited Gu Feng still thought that Kang Shinmu was lucky and did not deserve the 8-god star plate, let alone the hand seal. The Scarlet Flame Qilan bloodline power left on the 8-god star plate had been erased by Kang Shinmu, so Gu Feng planned to leave another mark. As long as she interfered with the 8-god star plate, Feng Mo would be able to exert enough power. Leave it to me. Feng Mo saw that Gu Feng was a little overwhelmed by anger, so he turned into a black shadow and quickly approached Kang Shinmu. Gu Feng knew that Feng Mo would be affected by the 8-god star plate, so she was a little hesitant. However, seeing that Feng Mo was approaching Kang Shinmu, and his aura was not weak at all, she was relieved. Feng Mo continued to fight Kang Shinmu, but Gu Feng did not stay idle. She sat on the ground and formed a seal with her hands. Suddenly, an array gradually formed around her. The moment the array formed around Gu Feng, Kang Shinmu had already sensed it. Although Kang Shinmu did not know what kind of array it was, it gave him a sense of oppression. Especially after the hand seal sensed this array, it actually started to spin. Before Kang Shinmu could find out what was going on, he was stopped by the mysterious person who came out of nowhere. This time, Feng Mo came for the 8-god star plate. As long as he destroyed the 8-god star plate, no one could stop him. Feng Mo's aura was so strong that Kang Shinmu could not react at all. Even though the hand seal could capture Feng Mo's figure, the supreme divine power could not keep up with Feng Mo's speed, so Feng Mo easily avoided it. In a hurry, Kang Shinmu activated the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal. 9 seals were activated at the same time. However, when the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal was released, Feng Mo's figure disappeared. One of the seals missed. Every time he released the power of a seal, Kang Shinmu's strength would be consumed by more than half. Now that one seal had missed, Kang Shinmu was not in a hurry to release the power of the second seal. Instead, he looked for traces of Feng Mo. After the first seal of the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal missed, Feng Mo's figure appeared again. He was already behind Kang Shinmu. His fist went straight for Kang Shinmu's back. When Kang Shinmu sensed Feng Mo's trace, it was already too late for him to react. Under such circumstances, he could only rely on the Great 10-Directional Devil Seal. If this seal missed again, Kang Shinmu would be in a dangerous situation. Given the current situation, Kang Shinmu had no more concerns. He could only take a gamble. However, when the Great Ten-Directional Devil Seal was released, Kang Shinmu clearly sensed that Feng Mo's figure behind him had disappeared. Kang Shinmu stopped the second seal of the Great Ten-Directional Devil Seal in time. In the next moment, he saw Feng Mo fighting with a black-robed figure. It was Cruel. Kang Shinmu had fought with Cruel before. The moment Cruel made a move, Kang Shinmu felt a familiar aura. Kang Shinmu looked at the 8-god star plate. The contract seal that belonged to Cruel lit up. This meant that Cruel had passed through the door of the contract and arrived in this world. Cruel, don't get in the way. Feng Mo said coldly when he saw Cruel. I should be the one saying that. Faced with Feng Mo's cold words, Cruel didn't stand on ceremony and replied indifferently. What's there to be arrogant for a lackey like you? Feng Mo's tone was even more sarcastic. Cruel didn't say anything else, but he stopped Feng Mo completely. Once Feng Mo tried to get close to Kang Shinmu, he would be beaten back by Cruel. Kang Shinmu was very surprised. He didn't expect Cruel to pass through the door of the contract. With Cruel blocking Feng Mo, the remaining Gu Feng would be taken care of by him. Kang Shinmu went to Gu Feng's side and took the initiative to attack. Gu Feng seemed to have expected that Kang Shinmu would be in the way. She threw out Blood Scar first. Kang Shinmu grabbed Blood Scar and released his devouring power. Chapter 5709. What kind of power is this? Gu Feng felt a cold aura coming towards her, but she didn't know what kind of power it was. Then, she realized that the bloodline power on the blood mark was flowing out rapidly. It's the devouring power. Gu Feng instantly understood. The devouring power should be the reason why Kang Shinmu was so arrogant. Gu Feng grinned maliciously. Her hand seals changed, and a shadow spread out from her body, instantly surrounding the devouring power. Kang Shinmu's expression froze. He couldn't connect with the devouring power. For a cultivator with twin supreme divine power, if both supreme divine powers were cultivated to a certain realm, the corresponding domain power would gradually merge and form a new domain. Gu Feng's supreme spiritual power and supreme dark power formed a new domain power, the supreme division domain. When the domain field was formed, it would divide the opponent's power. Of course, it wasn't just the opponent's power, but it could also divide the opponent's body. By constantly dividing the opponent's power, it could defeat the opponent. Under normal circumstances, when the supreme division domain gradually approached the rules, it would form an infinite division domain. This was the supreme division domain that Kang Shinmu had seen so far that he was most afraid of it. Just now, Gu Feng had displayed the supreme division domain power. She had divided Kang Shinmu's devouring power. The divided power would either be dissolved by the supreme division domain power or refined by the cultivator himself. I'll accept your devouring power, said Yi Shiwen. Gu Feng quickly sensed the extraordinariness of this devouring power. It could even devour the bloodline power of the scarlet flame Qilin on the blood mark. It was really amazing. I'm afraid you can't take it. Kang Shinmu narrowed his eyes. After activating the seal, his soul consciousness could merge with the supreme soul power. He didn't hesitate to release this power, pressing it towards Gu Feng. The powerful force instantly surrounded the range of the supreme division domain. The supreme division domain had a heaven-defying division ability, but in the end, it was just a kind of supreme domain power. To deal with the power of a supreme domain, one had to either use a restraining supreme domain or an even more powerful supreme domain. Or rule force. Kang Shinmu was still far from reaching that level. However, the supreme domain power that he grasped was also powerful enough. The supreme domain power that he had devoured earlier had already been refined and absorbed by the supreme divine flame domain. Now, the strength of the supreme divine flame domain far surpassed the 8th level. Most importantly, the power of the supreme divine flame domain could be combined with the power of the supreme heart soul. The moment the Supreme Heart Soul power invaded the Supreme Division domain, the Supreme Divine Flame domain suddenly extended and instantly enveloped the Supreme Division domain. Gu Feng was currently in the domain of Kang Shinmu's Supreme Divine Fire. This was her first time coming into contact with Kang Shinmu's Supreme Domain power, and she was also a little surprised. He had thought that a nameless person like Kang Shinmu, who had reached the 8th level of Supreme Divine Power, was already very strong. Now, it seemed that she had indeed underestimated him. The 8th level of the Supreme Divine Flame domain was very strong, but it was still not enough to defeat her. Gu Feng quickly adjusted the power of the Supreme Division domain and divided Kang Shinmu's Supreme Divine Flame domain. After a few breaths, the Supreme Divine Flame domain was divided into more than a dozen layers. After the Supreme Divine Flame domain was divided, Kang Shinmu couldn't even take it back. Kang Shinmu once again gathered the power of the Supreme Heart Soul and enveloped the devouring power that had been divided and couldn't be contacted. Similarly, the power of the Supreme Heart Soul was also divided into more than a dozen strands. However, because one strand of the Supreme Heart Soul was divided, it directly came into contact with the devouring power that had been divided. Even though it was only for a moment, Kang Shinmu had already reconnected with the devouring power. Kang Shinmu released the devouring power again and released it towards this strand of devouring power. Soon, the two strands of devouring power merged. The moment they merged, the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power was completely devoured. Although the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power had been completely devoured, the moment Kang Shinmu was about to retract the devouring power, it was once again divided by the Supreme Division domain. Just like before, the devouring power was divided into more than a dozen strands and couldn't be retracted. However, Kang Shinmu could still feel the devouring power after it had been divided. With a thought, Kang Shinmu's soul consciousness swept out in all directions. It gave Gu Feng the feeling that a wave of power had swept through her body. At this moment, her supreme splitting power seemed to have frozen for a moment. This feeling of stagnation quickly disappeared. It didn't even affect her power. However, Gu Feng became vigilant. Was that power the seal's power? Kang Shinmu had already obtained the seal. Her eyes narrowed, and there seemed to be blood surging in her eyes. Her eyes instantly turned red. At the same time, the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power above the bloodline. It condensed once again. The moment Kang Shinmu released his soul consciousness, he used the seal's power to retract the devouring power that had been divided. What he didn't expect was that the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power within the devouring power was so strong. It was obvious that it had devoured all the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power within the bloodline. Soon, Kang Shinmu once again felt the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power. At the same time, he noticed the change in Gu Feng's eyes. This time, Kang Shinmu understood that it wasn't the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power that could regenerate. Instead, it was the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power that Gu Feng carried. According to Tang Xiaoyu, Gu Feng had the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. The Nangong family's bloodline inheritance was a kind of replication ability. Gu Feng had also explained clearly that she had replicated the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power. However, Gu Feng's current situation was a little strange. Kang Shinmu gathered his strength and retreated continuously. The moment he retreated, a scarlet beast-shaped footprint would appear in the space where Kang Shinmu landed. Every time the beast-shaped footprint landed, the temperature in the space would rise abruptly. Scarlet Flame Qilan. Kang Shinmu stopped in his tracks and turned around. He saw a huge Qilan that was covered in flames appear in front of him. It was the Scarlet Flame Qilan. Not only did Gu Feng replicate the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power, she actually brought the Scarlet Flame Qilan with her. That's not the Scarlet Flame Qilan. Cruel's indifferent and emotionless voice suddenly rang in his ears. Kang Shinmu quivered. Could this Scarlet Flame Qilan be replicated by Gu Feng? If that was the case, as long as he destroyed the source of the replication power, which was the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance, he could defeat this Scarlet Flame Qilan. As Kang Shinmu was thinking, the scarlet flame Qilan's figure suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already behind Kang Shinmu. Although this scarlet flame Qilan was huge, it was abnormally agile. Not only was it agile, but it was also very strong. The scarlet flame Qilan's continuous attacks prevented Kang Shinmu from getting close to Gufeng, so he couldn't destroy the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. Instead, he was slapped to the ground by the scarlet flame Qilan and was sent into a deep pit. Even so, this scarlet flame Qilan was replicated. It couldn't possess the same strength as the original, and there were also certain restrictions. After a few exchanges, Kang Shinmu gradually grasped the scarlet flame Qilan's movement trajectory. The scarlet flame Qilan could only maintain its agile movement speed and strong attack power within 100 feet of Gufeng. Chapter 57:10. When Kang Shinmu discovered the weakness of the replicated scarlet flame Qilan, he was trapped by Gufeng within the range of the scarlet flame Qilan. The space distorted rapidly. Then, the distorted space was filled up by a large amount of power of darkness. It was accompanied by waves of supreme spiritual power. Gufeng could use two types of supreme god power at the same time. Kang Shinmu wasn't surprised that she could use both the power of darkness and supreme spiritual power at the same time. Kang Shinmu knew that when Gufeng used the two types of supreme god power, she couldn't use the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. In other words, she couldn't use the power of replication. Since she was using the two types of supreme god power, she had to restrain the power of replication. Kang Shinmu found Gufeng's weakness. She was standing in the air and her body was giving off waves of blood light. Countless crimson rays revolved around his body like numerous crimson pythons. These blood lights gave off a scorching aura and were very threatening. However, it wasn't the scarlet flame Qilan's bloodline power. Then, all that was left was the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. When Gufeng used the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance, she couldn't move as she pleased. Her range of movement was limited to a certain extent. Noticing this, Kang Shinmu didn't fight the scarlet flame Qilan head-on. To fight with a beast that had an endless supply of monsters was asking for trouble. However, with the scarlet flame Qilan in the way, Kang Shinmu couldn't get close to Gufeng. Moreover, although Gufeng couldn't move, the space she was in was within the scarlet flame Qilan's range of movement. Over there. Just when Jiang Shenwu was caught between a rock and a hard place, Cruel spoke indifferently. Jiang Shenwu heard the voice and glanced at Cruel. He did not see Cruel, but he saw a beam of black light approaching Gufeng in a strange trajectory. Kang Shinmu used his power and saw the path that the black light was pointing at. Following Cruel's guidance, Kang Shinmu got close to Gufeng. What he didn't expect was another scarlet flame Qilan. The two scarlet flame Qilans attacked from the front and back. Kang Shinmu's supreme soul power combined with his soul consciousness allowed him to see this distorted space clearly. He unleashed a spell and entered the twisted space. The attacks of the two scarlet flame Qilans collided. Moreover, the attacks of the two scarlet flame Qilans were unable to reach Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu also unleashed a spell technique to warp the space around him. He unleashed the power of his divine flame as well as his divine flame domain. The supreme mystical fire domain instantly engulfed the entire distorted space. At the same time, Kang Shinmu used 80% of the supreme mystical fire's power and smashed it towards Gufeng. Gufeng opened her eyes abruptly and clenched her fists to meet Kang Shinmu's attack. Gufeng was very strong. Even though it was just a supreme martial technique, the strength of the fist technique made Kang Shinmu feel a strong pressure. Although Kang Shinmu didn't have enough power, he could still fight Gufeng by using the spatial distortion technique. Gufeng didn't expect that Kang Shinmu would use the distorted space she created to unleash the full power of her supreme darkness force. This was something she couldn't allow to happen. Gufeng's strong hatred for Kang Shinmu made her retract the spatial spell, and the space returned to its original state. This meant that Kang Shinmu would have to face Gufeng head-on. Gu Feng's release of the spatial restraint also meant that she couldn't unleash the full power of her supreme darkness force. Ever since she was young, she had two innate powers. From the moment she stepped into the supreme realm, she cultivated the supreme dark force and the supreme spiritual force at the same time. It could be said that she had completely combined the two supreme divine forces. In terms of the combination of the two supreme divine forces, Gu Feng was definitely the best in the everlasting pavilion. However, her weakness was also very obvious. When the supreme darkness force was weak, the supreme spirit force would also be at a disadvantage. Gu Feng was facing this kind of situation. But Gu Feng was very confident and even conceited. She looked down on Kang Xinmu. She looked down on Kang Xinmu from the beginning. Even if her supreme divine force was affected, she still thought that she could easily kill Kang Xinmu. Everything that Kang Xinmu had would be hers. Compared to Gu Feng's conceited heart, Kang Xinmu knew that his opponent was very strong, so he was very cautious every time he attacked. The current situation wasn't disadvantageous to him. Kang Xinmu quickly found Gu Feng's weakness and forcefully repelled Gu Feng's twin supreme divine force and got close to Gu Feng. As for Gu Feng, Kang Xinmu didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness and gave her a fatal blow. Kang Xinmu also knew that Gu Feng was the daughter of the Everlasting Pavilion's pavilion master and had a very high status. Even so, showing mercy to Gu Feng would only put him in more danger. Gu Feng was unwilling and her entire body turned into a puddle of blood. Then, a scarlet flame Qilin walked out from her blood. Gu Feng died, but she still wanted to exchange for Kang Xinmu. The moment this scarlet flame Qilin appeared, the other two scarlet flame Qilins turned into two streams of blood qi and entered this scarlet flame Qilin. Don't be in a daze, copy. Cruel's cold voice suddenly rang out. Kang Xinmu just noticed that even though Gu Feng was dead, the demon sealer that she brought with her was still around and his strength was comparable to Cruel's. He didn't know if it was because of Gu Feng's influence, but the demon sealer started to be at a disadvantage. Finally, the demon sealer focused his attention on Kang Xinmu. The demon sealer's sudden action caused Kang Xinmu to be unable to react for a while. Compared to Gu Feng, the demon sealer's strength was much more terrifying. Kang Xinmu didn't have much understanding towards the living beings of the other world. Even though he had fought with Cruel before, he still couldn't understand Cruel's strength. The demon sealer and Cruel were of the same race. It gave Kang Xinmu the feeling that the demon sealer seemed to be stronger than Cruel. Against such an opponent, the current Kang Xinmu couldn't retaliate. In the end, Cruel's reaction was fast enough. While blocking the demon sealer's attack, he also slapped Kang Xinmu to the other side. Before Kang Xinmu could stabilize himself, he saw Cruel coming again. This time, Kang Xinmu finally saw the demon sealer's attack that was blocked by Cruel. It was a talisman. The words on the talisman were very complicated. It wasn't a language that Kang Xinmu had come across before. Get lost. The demon sealer roared as his two attacks were blocked by Cruel. One could tell that he was very anxious at this moment. From time to time, he would glance at the blood stains on the ground that had disappeared. He was eager to kill Kang Xinmu. Don't be so stubborn, Cruel said in a low voice. His body was still blocking in front of Kang Xinmu and he had no intention of retreating. You're the one who's stubborn. The demon sealer's voice was cold and his expression was malevolent. He didn't intend to say anything more to Cruel. That would only waste more time. The two of them started fighting once more. Kill him and you'll be able to revive her. Before the demon sealer clashed with Cruel, he suddenly shouted at the scarlet flame Qilin. The scarlet flame Qilin roared towards the sky and pounced towards Kang Xinmu. The moment it pounced over, the scarlet flame Qilin's figure disappeared. In that short instant, Kang Xinmu calculated that there were a total of 3 possible locations where the scarlet flame Qilin could appear. As long as he avoided these 3 locations, he would be able to avoid the scarlet flame Qilin's attack. Chapter 57:11. Just as Kang Shinmu had predicted, his next destination was the Scarlet Flame Qilin. The Scarlet Flame Qilin opened its bloody mouth and spat out scarlet flames. Soon, it sealed off Kang Shinmu's escape route. At this critical moment, a black aura suddenly swept over from the side and slapped Kang Shinmu to the side. Kang Shinmu was shaken by this black aura and felt his blood flow become unstable. However, it was also thanks to this black aura that he was slapped out of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's attack range. Otherwise, he would be trapped in the same spot. After Cruel slapped Kang Shinmu, he quickly blocked Feng Mo's path. This is a replica. The bloodline inheritance is concentrated in its heart. Cruel threw out a sentence indifferently. Kang Shinmu immediately understood. As long as the Scarlet Flame Qilin's heart was destroyed, the Scarlet Flame Qilin would disappear. The battle between Cruel and Feng Mo did not stop. Moreover, looking at Feng Mo's posture, he did not want to fight with Cruel. He kept getting closer to Kang Shinmu. "I'll send you off." Cruel glanced at the pool of blood on the ground and then at Kang Shinmu. Finally, he made up his mind. He had no feelings for Kang Shinmu. Of course, he had no feelings for Hai Fan either. He obeyed Hai Fan only because Hai Fan was the owner of the 8-God Star Plate. Hai Fan was no match for Kang Shinmu. As a result, the 8-God Star Plate fell into Kang Shinmu's hands. Cruel did not acknowledge Kang Shinmu as its owner. However, things were different now. Feng Mo had appeared. Feng Mo wanted Kang Shinmu dead. He would not let Feng Mo have his way. As soon as Cruel's voice fell, he used all his strength and slapped Kang Shinmu out of this space. Although Kang Shinmu had left the range of Gufeng's array, he was still injured by Cruel's attack. Fortunately, Cruel didn't have the heart to kill him. He only needed to spend some time to recover from his injuries. After Gufeng died, Feng Mo focused all his attention on Kang Shinmu. He desperately wanted to kill him in order to resurrect Gufeng. Kang Shinmu noticed the pool of blood left behind by Gufeng. Could it be the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance? Kang Shinmu would not give Gufeng any chances. After discovering that it was the bloodline inheritance of the Nangong family, he immediately rushed to the side of the pool of blood. In order to get close to the blood water, it also meant that he had once again entered the spatial barrier set up by Gufeng. At the same time, he entered the Scarlet Flame Qilin's attack range. "What are you doing?" Cruel was flustered and exasperated. They finally managed to send Kang Shinmu away, but he actually came back to die. Even Feng Mo couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Jia, it seems like your new master doesn't appreciate your kindness." "He's not my new master," Cruel denied immediately. Although he said that, he still rushed to Kang Shinmu's side. Cruel quickly sensed Kang Shinmu's intentions and knew what he wanted to do. He didn't say anything and just helped Kang Shinmu block the Scarlet Flame Qilin's flame attack. Kang Shinmu didn't destroy the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. Instead, he used his devouring power to refine and devour this power. Perhaps it would be useful to keep this power. After dealing with the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance, Kang Shinmu had no other way out. The Scarlet Flame Qilin saw that Gufeng's only hope was destroyed by Kang Shinmu. It seemed to go crazy, and its entire body swelled up. The blood energy around its body also swelled up, and it instantly devoured Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu couldn't escape at this time, so he made a bold move and allowed himself to be devoured by the Scarlet Flame Qilin. This was just a clone of the Scarlet Flame Qilin. Its entire body was made up of the Nangong family's bloodline power. Its body didn't have any normal internal organs. Even the heart that Cruel mentioned didn't exist. Without a heart, how could it destroy the Scarlet Flame Qilin? Roar! Kang Shinmu didn't find the heart. Instead, he was slowed by the Scarlet Flame Qilin's roar. Following this roar, the Scarlet Flame Qilin's entire body was covered in flames. Very quickly, it devoured Kang Shinmu's body. Kang Shinmu's supreme divine flame power had already reached the 8th level. He controlled the supreme divine flame power and tried to control the flames released by the scarlet flame Qilin. The control only lasted for a few breaths before the scarlet flame Qilin's flames broke free. Not only that, but the scarlet flame Qilin's flames also invaded Kang Shinmu's body. The external energy suddenly invaded, and Kang Shinmu tried his best to resist. However, this energy was extremely fast. The moment it entered his body, it didn't flow according to his meridians. Instead, it went straight to his soul consciousness and sea of consciousness. The soul consciousness was the most important existence for a supreme cultivator. Controlling the soul consciousness and sea of consciousness meant that the cultivator was basically done for. The scarlet flame Qilin controlled Kang Shinmu's soul consciousness and sea of consciousness mostly to revive Gufeng. Kang Shinmu was naturally very wary of this energy. However, he didn't expect that after the scarlet flame Qilin's flames entered his soul consciousness, it would instantly go silent. Just as he was condensing the supreme soul power, the supreme holy ice domain suddenly condensed. The energy that was wrapped in it was the scarlet flame Qilin's flames. The moment the supreme holy ice domain appeared, it directly extinguished the scarlet flame Qilin's fire crow power. Moreover, following the path of this flame power, it swept out of Kang Shinmu's body and entered the scarlet flame Qilin's body. Kang Shinmu followed the supreme holy ice domain's power and quickly found the scarlet flame Qilin's heart. Although it was called a heart, it was actually a drop of bloodline power. This was the weakness of the scarlet flame Qilin. Kang Shinmu didn't hesitate. He condensed his energy and directly attacked this drop of bloodline power. Kang Shinmu discovered the scarlet flame Qilin's weakness, and the scarlet flame Qilin started to resist violently. After a series of actions, it controlled this drop of bloodline power to flow to one side. Seeing that the bloodline power was about to leave his hands, Kang Shinmu couldn't allow it. He condensed his supreme devouring power and quickly caught up to this drop of bloodline power and instantly devoured it. After devouring this drop of bloodline power, Kang Shinmu's devouring power couldn't refine it, and he couldn't release it either. He could only temporarily store this power in the extreme 10-directional devil seal. Just as Kang Shinmu was about to complete this operation, something unexpected happened. The 7 devouring demon sealing arts inscription suddenly lit up and absorbed this drop of bloodline power. After absorbing this drop of bloodline power, the 7 devouring demon sealing arts inscription closed. This process happened in less than a breath's time. It was so fast that even Kang Shinmu couldn't react. The 7 devouring demon sealing art absorbed this drop of bloodline power. A deep sense of fear emerged in Kang Shinmu's heart. Was it the 7 devouring demon sealing arts inscription that absorbed this drop of bloodline power, or was it Feng Ling who absorbed this drop of bloodline power? The replicated scarlet flame Qilin instantly collapsed without its core. Kang Shinmu regained his freedom. How did you deal with that drop of bloodline power? Cruel was still helping Kang Shinmu block Feng Imo. Seeing that Kang Shinmu came out so quickly, he couldn't help but be surprised. Why? Kang Shinmu could hear the surprise in Cruel's tone. In other words, to deal with that drop of bloodline power, he needed a lot of power. Chapter 57:12. Who the hell are you? When Feng Imo saw this, he was also astonished. Kang Shinmu was quite capable to be able to find the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance in the scarlet flame Qilin. However, with Jiang Shenwu's current strength, it was simply impossible for him to destroy this drop of bloodline inheritance. Even Cruel might not be able to do it, let alone Kang Shinmu. For Kang Shinmu, it was impossible for him to destroy the bloodline inheritance. However, the truth was that the bloodline inheritance was indeed gone. It was as if it had disappeared into thin air. He could no longer sense any aura. How could Kang Shinmu destroy the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance? Feng Imo seemed to have gone mad. He used all his skills to capture Kang Shinmu. His moves were ruthless, but he had a certain degree of propriety. Clearly, he didn't want to kill Kang Shinmu. Instead, he wanted to capture Kang Shinmu alive. Facing Feng Imo, who was much stronger than him, Kang Shinmu tried his best to dodge. You have the ability to destroy the bloodline inheritance, but you don't dare to fight me? Feng Mo's words were full of contempt. Isn't that obvious? With my current cultivation, wouldn't I be courting death if I fought you? Kang Shinmu glanced at Feng Imo strangely. After a fierce battle, Feng Imo was finally willing to leave the Black Shadow. When he saw his appearance, Kang Shinmu was surprised. Feng Mo's true appearance was like a skeleton with a layer of skin. Coupled with the Black Death aura around him, he didn't look like a normal person at all. Feng Imo didn't listen to Kang Shinmu. He didn't think much of Kang Shinmu from the start. He also knew that Kang Shinmu couldn't destroy the bloodline inheritance. However, the truth was that Kang Shinmu had indeed destroyed the bloodline inheritance. Otherwise, he would have died in the Scarlet Flame Chelan's flames. Such a contradictory answer could only lead Feng Imo to guess that Kang Shinmu had a second identity that no one knew about, or that he had a heaven-defying magic treasure. Are you playing dumb with me? Feng Imo sneered. It doesn't matter. Wait until I bring you back to the Wuji Pavilion, then you can slowly pretend. Hearing the words Wuji Pavilion, Kang Shinmu's heart skipped a beat. With your ability, of all places, why did you have to go to the Wuji Pavilion? As soon as Cruel said that, he rushed forward and blocked Feng Mo's attack. Aren't we the same? Feng Imo immediately retorted. Didn't you become that brat's lackey? Do you think your status is higher than mine? You guys are different, Kang Shinmu explained. I treat him as a partner. Kang Shinmu did not care what kind of status he had in Cruel's heart, but Kang Shinmu firmly believed that all living beings who had signed contracts with the 8 gods' astrolabe were his companions. Cruel did not say anything. Feng Imo laughed mockingly. Partner? What was a partner? Can it become stronger? As Feng Imo laughed, waves of gray aura spread out from his body. Then, his actions suddenly became stiff. At this moment, Feng Mo's attack suddenly became stronger. Kang Shinmu felt that Feng Mo's attack was several times stronger than before. What confused Kang Shinmu the most was that while Feng Mo's attack became stronger, his aura changed as well. Those eyes that were full of mockery instantly turned into a dead void. It was as though he was a different person. Get out of the way. Cruel said calmly. Kang Shinmu responded and quickly moved back. 8 gods astrolabe. Cruel added. Kang Shinmu took out the 8 gods astrolabe. On the 8 gods astrolabe, the contract mark that belonged to Cruel was flashing continuously. However, what Kang Shinmu did not expect was that there was another mark that was flashing not far away from this mark. Kang Shinmu seemed to have thought of something as he raised his head and looked at Feng Imo. Feng Imo seemed to have sensed something as he rushed toward Kang Shinmu. His intention was to aim at the 8 gods astrolabe in Kang Shinmu's hand. This action caused a bold idea to emerge in Jiang Shenwu's mind. Feng Imo might have signed a contract with the 8 gods astrolabe. He tried to sense the flickering imprint, but he couldn't find anything for a while. The 8 gods astrolabe was not complete and he was not strong enough. He could not do it for now. Infuse your power into the 8 gods astrolabe. Cruel glanced at the 8 gods astrolabe in Kang Shinmu's hand and said. Kang Shinmu had already infused his power, but the 8 gods astrolabe did not have much of a reaction. Since Cruel said so, Kang Shinmu did as he was told. He gathered his soul and consciousness and infused it into the 8 gods astrolabe. Now, Kang Shinmu's soul and consciousness not only contained the power of the supreme holy ice realm but also the power of the seal. With the addition of these two powers, Kang Shinmu's soul and consciousness were not disturbed at all and directly entered the 8 gods astrolabe. After infusing his power, Kang Shinmu sensed the origin of the mark. That mark was indeed the contract mark between Feng Imo and the 8 gods astrolabe. The mark was still there, which meant that the contract between the two was still there. Kang Shinmu controlled the 8 gods' astrolabe and wanted to control Feng Imo. When he did so, he suddenly sensed a chilling aura coming out from within, heading straight for his sea of consciousness. It was so fast that it quickly went beyond the range of the supreme holy ice realm and invaded his soul and consciousness. After this strange power entered Kang Shinmu's soul and consciousness, it separated the power of the supreme holy ice realm from his soul and consciousness. It gradually sank into his soul and consciousness. Seal. Kang Shinmu only had time to awaken the seal. Kang Shinmu only had a superficial understanding of the power of the seal. At this point, he had to rely on the power of the seal. After awakening the seal, the engravings of the seal shattered inch by inch and then formed a dense array of runes, which intertwined and danced with each other. The moment these runes danced, Kang Shinmu only felt that he had a certain degree of control of the space around him. He had a feeling that as long as his mind moved, the space would distort, or shatter, or achieve the purpose of transmission. This was indeed the star map lock core, which was the power of the seal. These runes of the seal danced for a while and then fell into Kang Shinmu's soul and consciousness. At this moment, Kang Shinmu had a better understanding of space. These runes in the seal were rules. Whether they were rules or not, Kang Shinmu had completely absorbed the seal. At this time, his soul and consciousness became stronger again. The strange power that fell into his soul and consciousness was quickly found by Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu originally thought that this was the power of the seal of Feng Mo's contract. At this time, he found that this was the soul and consciousness of a cultivator. The reason why Feng Imo seemed to have become a different person was because Feng Imo was controlled by a mysterious cultivator. The controlling technique was similar to the puppet technique. Chapter 57:13. Feng Imo was being controlled by the supreme puppet technique. With a thought, Kang Shinmu controlled the devouring power to devour the supreme puppet technique that had invaded his mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. After devouring the supreme puppet technique, Kang Shinmu sensed the supreme puppet technique. The supreme puppet technique was a kind of supreme divine power that used one's mind and consciousness to control. In a way, the supreme puppet technique was similar to the power of the soul. Kang Shinmu had long mastered the power of the soul. At this time, it was not difficult for him to use the supreme puppet technique. Soon, he comprehended the essence of the supreme puppet technique. Although the supreme puppet technique that had invaded his mind and sea of consciousness was only a small part of it, fortunately, this supreme puppet technique was pure divine power and did not contain any other impure power. The more supreme puppet technique he devoured, the more power he would have after refining it. With the strength of Kang Shinmu's mind and consciousness, it was not difficult for him to master another kind of divine power. Although the supreme puppet technique he devoured was very small, fortunately, the supreme puppet technique could be used together with the power of the soul. This supreme puppet technique was enough. The cultivator controlling Feng Imo quickly realized that Kang Shinmu had devoured his supreme puppet technique. Once again, he released the powerful supreme puppet technique to control Feng Imo. Feng Imo, who had been standing motionless in midair, suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu had already absorbed the power of the Madra and grasped the method of using it. The instant Jiang Shenwu realized that Feng Imo had appeared behind him, he moved to Feng Mo's side with a thought and sent a backhand slap at Feng Imo. His reaction was very fast, and the supreme dragon martial technique he used was also very powerful. However, Kang Shinmu did not manage to slap Feng Imo away. Feng Imo seized the opportunity to grab Kang Shinmu's collar. Kang Shinmu could clearly see Feng Mo's every move. The moment Feng Imo grabbed his collar, he escaped into space. Feng Mo's hand gesture missed. Kang Shinmu was right in front of Feng Imo. Feng Imo seemed to have grabbed Kang Shinmu's collar. But in reality, Feng Mo's hand gesture missed. This scene was witnessed by Cruel, and he couldn't help but feel surprised. From his point of view, Kang Shinmu was just a mere supreme divine power level 8 cultivator. Although Shao Chen had the extreme 10-directional demonic seal and the 8-god star plate, his cultivation was not that great. Whether he could keep these Dharma treasures would depend on his luck. Treasures were important to cultivators, but they only played a supporting role. The true experts were those whose own strength was enough to dominate the world. But now, Cruel's opinion of Jiang Shenwu had changed. Cruel knew that Jiang Shenwu had already obtained the star map core-locking Madra. Initially, he had thought that Jiang Shenwu only possessed it temporarily. Little did he expect that Jiang Shenwu had already absorbed the Madra. Fong 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 fong. Jia. Fong 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 supreme seal Jia supreme fong. The Dharma seal was an existence that was close to the rules. That was something that nomological cultivators who had stepped into the gate of the rule could cultivate nomological power through their own hard work and then refine and condense it. At this time, Kang Shinmu, who was only a supreme master, had already absorbed the seal. The seal of the star map lock was mainly the power of space. From the looks of it, Kang Shinmu seemed to have mastered a certain amount of space rule power. Even though the demon sealing hand seal had missed, it did not give up. Instead, he launched another attack. Throughout the entire process, Feng Imo appeared extremely calm. It was obvious that after being controlled by the supreme puppet technique, Feng Mo's actions were completely at the mercy of others. With the power of the seal, Jiang Shenwu was not affected by the demon sealing power. He held the 8-god star plate in his hand and tried to control the contract mark that belonged to the demon sealing seal. A few breaths later, the contract mark lit up. Logically speaking, as long as he could contact the contract imprint, he would be able to control the demon's sealing seal. Of course, the control he was talking about was different from the supreme puppet technique. Instead, he was talking about making the demon sealer obey his orders. Seeing that the demon sealing seal had stopped attacking, his entire body was suddenly wrapped in layers of gray light. Following that, Kang Shinmu lost contact with the contract mark. The gray light wrapped around the demon sealing seal suddenly fell onto the 8-god star plate and entered the demon sealing seal's contract mark. The demon sealing seal's contract mark immediately dimmed. No matter how hard Kang Shinmu tried to summon it, the contract mark did not light up. At the same time, the demon sealing seal attacked again. Kang Shinmu could clearly sense that this power was much weaker than the power that the demon sealing seal had displayed a few breaths ago. Relying on his mastery of the seal, Kang Shinmu skillfully used space rule power and quickly repelled the demon sealing seal. What happened to you? The demon sealing seal looked at Kang Shinmu in disbelief. In just a few short rounds, how did Kang Shinmu's strength skyrocket so much? After the demon sealing seal asked this question, he seemed to have thought of something and did not ask anymore. Following that, the demon sealing seal caught a glimpse of the 8-god star plate. He seemed to be very afraid of the 8-god star plate and did not stay any longer. He turned and dashed to the side, his figure quickly hiding in the void. Even though Kang Shinmu had mastered the seal, he could not sense any traces of the demon sealing seal. Seeing that the demon sealing seal had left, Cruel also planned to return. Thank you so much. Jiang Shenwu thanked Cruel from the bottom of his heart. He is one of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans in the other world, the clan leader of the Sea clan, Cruel said calmly. The 4 great corpse ancestor clans, Kang Shinmu had heard of them before. The first time he heard of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans was through Leng Zhanghong's records. He did not expect to meet one of the 4 great corpse ancestor clans today. You have offended him. You won't have it easy. Cruel glanced at Kang Shinmu and disappeared. On the 8-god star plate, the contract mark that belonged to Cruel also dimmed. Kang Shinmu was helpless. No matter what, Cruel had a contract relationship with him. Cruel really didn't give him any face. After Cruel left, Kang Shinmu did not stay and left this place. There was one thing he was sure of. The demon sealing seal knew that he was controlled by the supreme puppet technique. Moreover, he should know the cultivator who used the supreme puppet technique. The demon sealing seal was brought here by Gufeng. Then, the cultivator who used the supreme puppet technique was from the everlasting pavilion. When Hai Fan forced him into a dead end and Kang Shinmu counterattacked, Kang Shinmu already knew that he and the everlasting pavilion were destined to be mortal enemies. It was no longer important whether the cultivator who cultivated the supreme puppet technique was from the everlasting pavilion or not. Kang Shinmu left this place. Although he knew that Gufeng could not be Senior Mo Ye's opponent, Gufeng was from the everlasting pavilion. He could not be sure how many people from the everlasting pavilion came to the secret realm this time. After walking out of this place, Kang Shinmu saw Mo Ye. Mo Ye looked a little hurried. Senior. Kang Shinmu hurried over to Mo Ye. Kang Shinmu. Seeing Kang Shinmu, Mo Ye finally heaved a sigh of relief. Senior, are you okay? Kang Shinmu looked at Mo Ye from head to toe. Mo Ye was not injured, but her breathing was a little chaotic. I'm fine. But you, that Gufeng did not cause trouble for you, right? Mo Ye also looked at Kang Shinmu. After a round of inspection, Mo Ye's eyes lit up. Senior, look at this. Chapter 57:14. This is, the bloodstain? Where did you get it? Mo Ye had experienced the power of the bloodstain. It was very strong. Its weakness was that it relied too much on the power of the Crimson Flame Qilin's bloodline. Without the power of the Crimson Flame Qilin's bloodline, it was just an ordinary Dharma artifact. Even so, Mo Ye was still surprised to see the bloodstain in Kang Shinmu's hand. When Mo Ye touched the bloodstain, she couldn't feel any power of the Crimson Flame Qilin's bloodline, not even Gufeng's aura. Could it be? Mo Ye immediately understood and her expression froze. Yes. Kang Shinmu understood what Mo Ye was trying to say and nodded. No wonder I can see that your cultivation has improved a lot. Mo Ye's beautiful eyes curved slightly as she said softly. Compared to the 8-god star plate, the bloodstain doesn't have much collection value. Kang Shinmu looked at the bloodstain and wondered if he should throw it away. Mo Ye looked at the bloodstain again and said gently, the quality of the bloodstain is indeed ordinary, but the material is a bit special. You should keep it first. I'll listen to you, Senior. Kang Shinmu put the bloodstain away. Kang Shinmu roughly told Mo Ye what had happened to him during this period of time, and Mo Ye finally understood. At that time, she was stopped by Dan Yuanfei, which gave Gufeng the opportunity to escape. She knew that Gufeng would definitely come to find Kang Shinmu, so she didn't continue fighting with Dan Yuanfei and came here as soon as possible. Speaking of which, that grand senior brother of the everlasting pavilion has some tricks up his sleeve. Mo Ye was worried about Kang Shinmu and couldn't defeat Dan Yuanfei quickly, so she could only use her own spells to get rid of Dan Yuanfei. The people of the everlasting pavilion are quite arrogant, Kang Shinmu said. First it was Hai Fan, then Gufeng, then that grand senior brother. Now we have a grudge with the everlasting pavilion. Kang Shinmu's tone was a bit helpless. How can it be smooth sailing on the path of cultivation for us cultivators? To put it bluntly, we advance by stepping on the bodies of the weak. Kang Shinmu naturally understood this as well. Since the enmity had already been established, he would naturally avoid dealing with the people of the everlasting pavilion. The two of them didn't stay any longer. They decided to look for Tang Xiaoyu first before going to the cave. According to the time that had passed, all the cultivators who had entered the secret realm had basically found the cave abode where the star map lock was located. Going to the abode now was undoubtedly walking into a trap. In the end, the three of them met at the only ancient ruins in the secret realm. The scene of their encounter was a little awkward. For some unknown reason, Tang Xiaoyu was tied up and trapped in an array formation. The formation looked like a simple trapping formation, but it was constantly changing, so it was impossible to determine the formation base in a short period of time. It was precisely because of this that Tang Xiaoyu was unable to escape the trap formation. Senior Mo, Brother Jiang. Tang Xiaoyu, who was busy struggling, raised his head and saw Kang Xinmu and Emoya walking over. I was just about to go look for you. I didn't expect you to come so soon. Tang Xiaoyu grinned brightly. If he wasn't tied up, Tang Xiaoyu's words would be quite cool. You were tied up by the Everlasting Pavilion's eldest senior brother? Kang Xinmu asked in confusion. Tang Xiaoyu was tied up by a trapping array, which was Gu Feng's technique. However, Gu Feng was dead, and all the trapping arrays she set up would disappear. There was only one possibility left. The person who set up the array was the Everlasting Pavilion's eldest senior brother. Yuan Fei is no match for me. Tang Xiaoyu curled his lips and said faintly. I was tied up by my eldest senior brother. He still has something to do and will probably come back later. While speaking, Tang Xiaoyu escaped from the trapping array. Since you're all right, then I'm relieved. I'll leave first. See you later. After saying that, Tang Xiaoyu's figure moved and disappeared from the spot. The moment his figure disappeared, Kang Xinmu clearly sensed that the space was being folded 9 times. After not seeing each other for a while, Tang Xiaoyu's 10,000 origin folding technique had already reached the 9th level. His talent in the 10,000 origin folding technique was indeed extraordinary. Senior, I've already obtained the star map lock. When the time is right, we can go to the cave abode, Kang Xinmu said frankly. If I remember correctly, the star map lock is actually a space seal, right? Mo Ya's beautiful eyes curved slightly as she said gently. Yes, it's a space seal. Kang Xinmu hesitated for a moment. I should have grasped a certain level of power. As soon as he said that, Mo Ya was surprised. A seal was the source of power that a law cultivator would condense when they reached a certain level. Encountering a dermic seal was not a surprising thing, but mastering a dermic seal was enough to shock people. Kang Xinmu was just a supreme superior cultivator, and his supreme divine power was approaching the 10th level. However, the gap between the 8th and 10th level was not something that could be crossed with time. Some cultivators would never be able to cross this gap in their entire lives. Mo Ya's slender jade-like hand pressed between Kang Xinmu's eyebrows and injected her supreme divine power. Kang Xinmu quickly sensed Mo Ya's power. He tried his best not to repel Mo Ya's power. However, when Mo Ya's power reached his soul consciousness, it was devoured by the devouring power. Kang Xinmu instantly felt a little awkward. He hurriedly controlled the devouring power to release this power. Mo Ya examined her soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness for a while before withdrawing her power. On the surface, Kang Xinmu's chi meridians did not change much. In reality, the strength of Kang Xinmu's chi meridians had far surpassed what it was before. Chi meridians determined the strength of this supreme dragon martial technique. With the strength of Kang Xinmu's current chi meridians, the supreme dragon martial technique that he displayed could easily defeat a supreme superior cultivator with level 7 supreme divine power. Just by using the supreme dragon martial technique and not using the supreme divine power, Xiao Qin could easily defeat Xiao Qin. Mo Ya felt that Kang Xinmu's soul consciousness was very strong. It was like an ocean with no end to it, deep and mysterious. Suddenly, Mo Ya's expression froze. Kang Xinmu's aura was not right. Kang Xinmu, how did you deal with the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power before you obtained the bloodstain? Mo Ya asked. Senior, the reason why the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power on the bloodstain is because Gu Feng used the replication power. Kang Xinmu said truthfully. Apart from the supreme dark energy and supreme spiritual energy, she also has a duplication power that is comparable to the supreme divine energy. Replication power? Mo Ya's expression froze. I know about the supreme replication power. Mo Ya thought for a while. Originally, the supreme replication power was a type of multiple supreme divine power. However, as the cultivation method changed, some things happened. The current supreme replication power, in a sense, was a single supreme divine power. It was not a natural power, but a single supreme divine power. That person definitely knew about the things that happened between the multiple supreme divine power to a single supreme divine power. Before becoming a single supreme divine power, the corresponding cultivator could still use the supreme replication power. By now, the cultivators of that era would have long stepped into the gate of rules and become nomological cultivators. What was certain was that there were very few cultivators of the supreme replication power in that period, less than 10. From what Emoya knew, no one should have grasped the supreme replication power after becoming a single supreme divine power. Gufeng used the power of replication. It seems to be the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance power, Kang Shinmu said. The Nangong family seems to be in the same spatial domain as the outer realm, but not in the same spacetime. Chapter 57:15. Senior, do you know anything about the Nangong family? Kang Shinmu sometimes felt that Senior Emoya was like a know-it-all. However, he did learn a lot of things from her that he had never heard of before. My understanding of the Nangong family is the same as our understanding of the Wuji Pavilion and the Tianyuan Palace. It's very one-sided. Emoya smiled gently. I only heard that they were once active in the outer realm. I have never heard of their bloodline inheritance, nor did I know that they were related to the Wuji Pavilion. At that time, I met the eldest senior brother of the Tianyuan Palace. When he called Gufeng, he mentioned the Nangong family. Her duplication ability came from the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. Kang Shinmu said. Gufeng eventually used a drop of bloodline to duplicate the Scarlet Flame Qilin. Her devouring ability devoured that drop of bloodline. The Nangong family's bloodline inheritance that was devoured by the devouring ability was finally absorbed by the 7 devouring demons sealing art. This was what Kang Shinmu was afraid of. He didn't know whether it was the 7 devouring demons sealing art or Fengling that absorbed that drop of bloodline. Kang Shinmu could trust the 7 devouring demons sealing art. However, he couldn't trust Fengling. Fengling called himself the spirit of the 7 devouring demons sealing art. What kind of spirit could summon the contract life form of the 8 gods astrolabe? The Nangong family's bloodline inheritance. It seems that we have to make a trip to the outer realm. Emoya focused and said. Kang Shinmu was stunned. He had killed the daughter of the Wuji Pavilion's pavilion master. Wasn't going to the outer realm the same as courting death? Emoya saw the change in Kang Shinmu's expression and couldn't help but smile. Are you scared? I'm scared. I might die. Kang Shinmu resentfully rubbed his nose. Relax. What will come. Emoya said softly. Moreover, the secret realm seems to be moving toward the outer realm this time. We should keep a low profile and investigate the Nangong family. Otherwise, placing an unknown bloodline power in your body is also a hidden danger. Emoya's words were not false. They should do so. Kang Shinmu agreed with Moya. The two of them set off toward the Immortal's Cave with the star map lock. Along the way, they could see more and more cultivators. The most obvious ones were the 4 great sects of the outer realm. Kang Shinmu and Emoya had no intention of clashing with the 4 great sects, so they headed straight for their destination. Isn't that guy Kang Shinmu? Who is Kang Shinmu? Previously, when I was in the desolate ancient city, I saw that he had a conflict with Wuji Pavilion's Hai Fan. I thought that Hai Fan had killed him. I never thought that he would actually come here. Some cultivators passing by saw Kang Shinmu and started chatting with him. It was supposed to be an ordinary conversation, but it attracted the attention of the 4 great sections. Especially the people from Wuji Pavilion. The disciples of Wuji Pavilion listened to Yuan Fei's order and gathered together. When they heard Kang Shinmu's name, they all stopped and looked at Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu and Emoya were unmoved and continued to head for their destination. Stop. However, someone shouted at them to stop. It was the people of Wuji Pavilion. The person who spoke was older. He was one of the elders of Wuji Pavilion, Guyangfeng. As soon as Guyangfeng spoke, the people of Wuji Pavilion surrounded Kang Xinmu and Emoya. The moment the crowd formed an encirclement, a trapping array appeared, sealing off all the space that the two of them could move about. It seemed that Gufeng was able to use the bloodstains to release array-based spells. It was not because the bloodstains were special, but because the people of Wuji Pavilion all knew array-based spells. Kang Xinmu and Emoya were forced to stop. Although the people of Wuji Pavilion had set up a trap array, Kang Xinmu had mastered the seal. Any array that was related to sealing space could be easily broken by him. Kang Xinmu quickly broke the array that trapped them. Not being bound by the array was Kang Xinmu's guarantee for Emoya's safety. You have the bloodline aura of the red flame Qilin. Guyangfeng's turbid eyes locked onto Kang Xinmu. The powerful aura emitted from his body directly oppressed Kang Xinmu. Kang Xinmu's soul consciousness and seal were combined. Facing Guyangfeng's oppressive aura, he was very calm. Where is Feng? Guyangfeng was certain that Gu Feng's disappearance had something to do with Kang Xinmu and questioned. The disciples of Wuji Pavilion had already released their supreme divine powers. The moment several supreme divine powers were released, a new array formation formed around Kang Xinmu and Emoya. Moreover, the array formation was slowly changing. Kang Xinmu quickly found the reason why the array formation was changing. It wasn't that the disciples of Wuji Pavilion had many supreme divine powers, but that the new array formation they set up was a derivative array. The core of a derivative array formation was that it would constantly change. Moreover, if the derivative array formation was not activated, it would be very difficult to distinguish what attribute the array formation was. Kang Xinmu only sensed that this was a derivative array formation. As the derivative array continued to expand, Kang Xinmu understood that this was not a simple trap array. It was most likely an offensive attribute array formation. Since it was a derivative array formation, when the array formation was activated, it meant that Kang Xinmu and Emoya were trapped inside. At this time, the derivative array formation had not been activated. Kang Xinmu and Emoya could only remain vigilant. Who is that? Kang Xinmu asked unhurriedly. Stop pretending. You have the bloodline aura of the red flame Qilin on you. That's the power in Feng's bloodline, Guyangfeng said coldly. From this posture, he had already determined that Kang Xinmu was the culprit behind Gu Feng's death. Whether he admitted it or not was no longer important. If I say no, will you let us go? Kang Xinmu asked directly. Guyangfeng laughed out loud. Kid, you took our Wuji Pavilion's things. Do you think you can leave the secret realm alive? Not only Guyangfeng, but even the disciples of Wuji Pavilion next to him, and even some of the disciples of other sects who were watching the show, were full of ridicule. Among the four major sects of the extraterritorial realm, Wuji Pavilion was famous for being unreasonable. The people of Wuji Pavilion, let alone a wandering cultivator like Kang Xinmu, even the people of the major sects in the extraterritorial realm tried to avoid conflict as much as possible. Kang Xinmu had long expected Guyangfeng to say this. In other words, no matter what he said, Guyangfeng would not let them go, so there was no need to talk nonsense. Kang Xinmu directly activated a hand seal and used it to quickly find a breakthrough in the derivative array formation. Senior. Kang Xinmu signaled Emoya to get closer to the breakthrough. Kang Xinmu, be careful not to fall into a trap. Emoya's beautiful eyes narrowed. She was somewhat skeptical about the breakthrough in the derivative array formation. After Emoya's reminder, Kang Xinmu suddenly understood. Chapter 57:16. What Kang Xinmu thought was the breakthrough was actually the key to activating the derivative formation. Usually, for this kind of derivative formation, the activation of the formation by the caster and the activation of the formation by the trapped person would have different effects. It was obvious that if Jiang Xinwu and Emoya triggered the derivation formation that the everlasting pavilion disciples had set up themselves, the two of them would be completely trapped inside. It's my fault. Kang Shinmu glanced at the breakthrough he had just found with lingering fear. They haven't activated the formation yet. They must be waiting for us to trigger it ourselves. We just need to avoid the formation base and leave the formation, Moya said. In just a few breaths, Moya had already figured out the situation of the derivative formation by relying on the power of her cultivation technique. Senior, I took a look just now. The two of us seem to be surrounded by the formation base. After Kang Shinmu mastered the Dharma seal, he had a certain insight into space-type formations. Although he was not very sure about the location of the formation base, and there were a few that seemed to be the existence of the formation base. In short, these formation bases were surrounding them. Once they used any kind of space-type spell, they would trigger any of the formation bases. Looking at the layout of the formation base, once one of the formation bases was triggered, it would form a chain reaction, and the formation would automatically activate the next formation base. This meant that the two of them were the ones who triggered the formation. This was the result that Guyang Feng wanted. Well, we can't use any space-type spell techniques. Moya also noticed this tricky problem. Since they couldn't use space-type spell techniques, they could only rely on their own peerless martial skills to break through. Kang Shinmu's peerless dragon martial skill had only destroyed one of the formation bases. Before he could take a few steps, a new formation base was formed. The new formation base's structure had also changed. If they wanted to destroy it again, they would have to reanalyze the structure of the formation base. It seemed that using peerless martial skills to destroy the formation was also not feasible. The fact that the Everlasting Pavilion's disciples were able to complete an entire derivative formation together meant that their minds and consciousness were connected. They would perfect the formation based on the changes that occurred in the derivative formation, so that the formation could maintain its strength at all times. This was their strength, and it was also their breakthrough point. Kang Shinmu glanced at the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion around him. They were obviously different people, but their current state was surprisingly the same. Especially the breathing, it could be said to be on the same rhythm. There were about a dozen disciples of the Wuxia Pavilion present. More than a dozen people were casting a derivation formation at the same time. If one person's soul consciousness was broken, wouldn't the entire derivation formation be destroyed? Kang Shinmu was thinking about this, and Moya was also thinking about the same thing. Of course, this was also a disadvantage that Guyang Feng and the others were well aware of. Brat, don't think too much. You won't be able to escape. Come with us obediently so that you won't suffer any physical pain. Guyang Feng commanded the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion. The disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion chanted and made the same hand gesture. The derivation formation was evolving the formation base in a very orderly manner. Kang Shinmu ignored Guyang Feng's sarcasm. Kang Shinmu was familiar with the derivation formation. He had also experienced it personally, so he had a knack for it. The evolution of the derivation formation seemed to be perfectly connected, but Kang Shinmu was still able to grasp the gap in the evolution of the formation. Kang Shinmu condensed the Supreme Dragon martial skill and took advantage of this gap to rush to the nearest disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion and hit him without hesitation. The disciple didn't even have time to scream, and his body flew out. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. All of this happened so suddenly that even Guyang Feng didn't have time to react. Guyang Feng was sure that Kang Shinmu couldn't use spatial techniques in the presence of the derivation formation, so he wasn't afraid of Kang Shinmu approaching the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion. Even if Kang Shinmu's movement technique was different from ordinary people, there would still be a certain flaw. However, what Guyang Feng didn't expect was that not only was Kang Shinmu's movement technique good, but he also directly repelled a disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion. Seeing that the disciple didn't say anything for a long time, he was afraid that he was dead. That's it? Guyang Feng saw through Kang Shinmu's thoughts. Kang Shinmu wanted to break the disciples who had set up the derivation formation one by one so that he could break the derivation formation. Unfortunately, this idea was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Kang Xinmu ignored Gu Yangfeng and focused all his attention on breaking the formation. Before mastering the derivation formation, Kang Xinmu could only use this method to break the formation. After defeating a disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion, the rest of the disciples instantly adjusted their positions and stabilized the derivation formation. Kang Xinmu had already seen through all of this, so he took advantage of the time when they changed the formation to rush forward again. This time, Kang Xinmu rushed to the side of the Everlasting Pavilion's disciple who was furthest away from him. The moment Kang Xinmu approached, the disciple noticed it. When he was setting up the formation, he had already released his supreme divine power. Therefore, the moment Kang Xinmu approached the disciple, he fell into the encirclement of the supreme divine power. It was a very common supreme divine power, and it was only at the 7th level. Now that Kang Xinmu's supreme divine power had already broken through the 8th level, it was very easy for him to defeat a 7th level supreme divine power. Gu Yangfeng saw it clearly now. Kang Xinmu did not use his movement technique to get close to the disciple, but a spatial technique. Using a spatial technique in my derivation formation? Gu Yangfeng's face was full of sarcasm. He was so surprised that his voice was very hoarse. Aren't you afraid of being trapped in a spatial crack and never coming out? Gu Yangfeng took the initiative to join the derivation formation this time. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion that Kang Xinmu defeated just now was the key person in this derivation formation. He could also be compared to the foundation of the derivation formation. Now that one of the foundation had been destroyed, the formation needed a new one. Even if there was no new foundation to replenish it, it should be able to evolve in time so that the formation could operate normally in the corresponding foundation. Gu Yangfeng naturally underestimated Kang Xinmu's ability. Since Kang Xinmu found out that this disciple was the key to the derivation formation, he naturally found out the other key points one by one. When Gu Yangfeng personally entered the derivation formation, Kang Xinmu defeated 2 more disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion in succession. All of this happened in just a breath's time. Even Emoya, who only paid attention to Kang Xinmu, could not help but exclaim. After Kang Xinmu comprehended the seal, he awakened the talent of the derivation formation. Emoya thought that if there was a chance in the future, she would also let Kang Xinmu learn the derivation formation. Kang Xinmu defeated several disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion one after another, causing the derivation formation to collapse. Although the remaining disciples tried their best to evolve the derivation formation, they could not stop Kang Xinmu's attack. Kang Xinmu took advantage of the victory to chase after the last disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. All the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion who participated in the derivation formation were defeated by Kang Xinmu one by one. Gu Yangfeng's face was gloomy to the extreme. Useless trash. Glancing coldly at the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion who fell to the side, Gu Yangfeng's face was filled with killing intent. Compared to them, you are too weak. Go to hell. After saying that, Gu Yangfeng waved his hand. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.